Chapter 466. The figure that walked out of the box of bliss walked up to Wu Wei in a wobbly manner. Wu Go. Looking at the familiar figure in front of him, Wu Wei shed tears of joy. At this time, he lost the sharpness and vigilance that an elite Jonin should have. He ignored the hidden insidiousness between his son's eyebrows. Whoosh! Just as Wu Wei was about to step forward to hug his son, Wu Go, who had just escaped from the box of bliss, Wu Go, who was staggering, suddenly appeared in front of Wu Wei in a flash. His speed was so fast that Wu Wei, who was one of the strongest elite Jonin in the grass village, couldn't react. Following that, a sharp pain came from Wu Wei's chest. He looked down and saw that his son Wu Go's right hand had already pierced into his chest. Fresh blood spurted out from the wound and splashed onto Wu Go's young face. It was an extremely absurd scene. Wu Wei stared at Wu Go in surprise and asked with difficulty, "Why?" Wu Go stretched out his tongue and licked the blood on his face. He revealed a look of enjoyment as he squinted his eyes and moaned, "It's really sweet. You are not my son." In shock and unwillingness, Wu Wei slowly fell to the ground. Wu Go smiled. "Not really." Not far away, the 4 elders of the grass village were also shocked by this change. There is no doubt that the box of bliss didn't fulfill Wu Wei's wish. It didn't release the real Wu Go, but instead released a monster that looked exactly like Wu Go. At this moment, they realized that the revival of the grass village that they had been longing for was just a moon in the water, a flower in the mirror. Glancing coldly at the 4 terrified elders, Wu Go wrinkled his nose and sniffed, and immediately said with a look of disgust, "A group of rotten old things, even the blood on their bodies is disgusting." After saying that, he moved his eyes to the other side and looked at the distant my village, and saliva flowed out of the corner of his mouth, as he murmured, "So much delicious blood." At this time, Stainless' originally delicate and handsome face suddenly twisted. In that instant, his body grew taller, turning into a giant monster with fangs, 4 slender limbs, and a pair of wings on his back. He had sharp claws, and his back was covered with a pair of wings. The monster used the sharp claws on its legs to grab the box of bliss from the ground. Then, it spread its wings and flew towards my village with a gust of wind. The 4 elders of the Kusanagi village fell to the ground one after another. In my village, amidst the rising and falling alarms, the entire village became extremely noisy. The shouts and cries on the streets intertwined, adding to the panic. But after all, the village has conducted several evacuation drills, so soon my ninjas began to spontaneously maintain order and organize the villagers to enter the shelter in an orderly manner. At the same time, a large number of my ninjas gathered in front of the Naruto building from all directions of the village, waiting for Naruto's orders. On the outer wall, my patrols were vigilantly observing the surroundings. Although everyone had a bad premonition, so far, no one knew who the enemy was, where they would come from, and how they would attack Konoha. Suddenly, a Hyuga member of the patrol on the outer wall pointed to the distance and shouted, "At 11 o'clock, there is an unknown object in the sky approaching quickly." The surrounding people immediately looked over and saw a small black dot on the horizon under the setting sun. What is that? It seems to be flying in the sky. Is it a bird? If it is a bird, it is too big. The members of the patrol team, who were bewildered, began to discuss among themselves in low voices. But in the time it took to say a few words, the small black dot in the distant horizon rapidly grew larger. Accompanied by violent winds and sharp whistling sounds, it whistled over, so fast that it caught everyone off guard. The patrol leader shouted sternly, "Quick, go and inform Naruto-sama, the enemy has appeared." Boom! Before he finished speaking, the huge monster directly hit the tall outer wall of Mai, making a loud roar. In an instant, smoke and dust filled the sky, and gravel flew everywhere. The sturdy outer wall that was protecting Mai was hit by the monster with just one hit, and a gap that was dozens of meters wide appeared. In the pile of gravel, the seriously injured patrol leader looked at the monster in the sky with a dull gaze and murmured, What kind of monster is this?" At this time, a hearty voice sounded, "Psychic art." Bang in the white smoke, Mount Myaboku's toad Bunta leaped out and slashed at the monster that was wreaking havoc near the outer wall. Bunta's slash was very sudden, but at the moment when his long sword was about to hit the monster with its back facing him suddenly jumped, narrowly avoiding his slash. Jiraiya on Bunta's head shouted, "What a pity, it almost hit it." After seeing the appearance of the monster clearly, Bunta was shocked. "Woo? Damn, how can it be this monster? Jiraiya, I'm afraid we are in big trouble." In Danzo's laboratory, Hyojin, who was doing an experiment, suddenly shook his hand, almost destroying the experimental material. Hyojin frowned. Of course, it was not because of him that his hand shook, but because the whole laboratory just shook. Orochimaru, who was not far away, also stopped the experiment in his hand at this time. His face showed both annoyance at being disturbed, but also some curiosity about the sudden tremor. One must know that Shimura Danzo's laboratory is hidden dozens of meters underground, so an ordinary explosion on the ground won't affect the laboratory at all. And for such a huge tremor in the laboratory, something terrible must have happened on the ground. Danzo, who was also patrolling the laboratory, slowly stopped his footsteps. His face showed a thoughtful expression. Not long after, 2 root ninjas hurriedly came to the laboratory. One of them reported to Danzo, "Sama, a monster attacked the village and destroyed the outer wall of the village. It seems to be the revenge of the Akatsuki." The other one said, "Sama, our manpower has been gathered. Do you want to attack immediately?" Danzo waved his hand without hesitation. "Stay here." The 2 root ninjas were taken aback for a moment. They didn't expect that Danzo would give the order to stay put. Looking at each other, one of them said in a low voice, "Senpai, the monster has already entered the village." Danzo's face suddenly sank. "Are you questioning this old man's order? This subordinate doesn't dare." The 2 root ninjas hurriedly lowered their heads. Danzo lightly snorted, "Stand down." At this time, Hyojin stood up and asked Danzo, "As the advisor of Mai was attacked, are you not going to do anything?" Danzo said naturally, "This old man has a more important mission." Hyojin grinned and thought, "The village was attacked, but you don't even dare to show your face. What's the point of fighting for Naruto?" Chapter 467. Looking at Shimura Danzo's confident expression without the slightest hint of guilt, Suijin shook his head. The young Danzo may have had the faith to protect Mai in the darkness, but the current Danzo has changed. He has lost himself in the pursuit of power. The phrase "for Mai" has now become an excuse for him to hypnotize himself. It seems that as long as he mutters this phrase, all his betrayal of the village has become an expedient measure that can be forgiven, and all the sacrifices of the other people in the village have become a matter of course. In the original world, whether it was the Nine Tails Rebellion launched by Obsidian, the Mai Collapse Plan launched by Orochimaru, or the attack on Mai by Nagato, Danzo and his subordinates, Root, were nowhere to be found. Every time the village was in trouble, the Root, whose power can almost compete with the Umbu, chose to go into hiding. From this point alone, it can be seen that Danzo values his power more than the village. What he wants to protect is not Mai, but his own position. Hyojin didn't hide his disdain for Danzo. He sneered and said, "I'm going out to take a look." Orochimaru also stood up. "I'm really curious, what kind of monster attacked the village?" Danzo was a little annoyed. "The experiment has reached a critical moment. Do you want to give up halfway?" Hyojin, who was passing by Danzo, said casually, "I'm just going out to take a look. This doesn't affect our agreement." Danzo turned around and said with a gloomy face, "Akatsuki has been preparing for revenge for a long time. It's not simple. Does Amatsukami want to get involved?" Hyojin, who was on his way out, stopped and turned back to glance at Danzo. Elder Mai, it sounds strange for you to say such things to a member of Amatsukami. Those who don't know might think that I'm the elder of Mai. After saying that, Hyojin did not stay any longer and quickly walked out. Looking at Hyojin's departing figure, Danzo spoke coldly. My experiment has yet to be completed. I hope you won't lose your life because of curiosity. Orochimaru laughed in a hoarse voice and said, Hey, worried about him? He's the real monster. Danzo frowned. You seem to know him well? Did you have any contact in private? Orochimaru smiled and didn't say anything else. He walked past the Danzo. Soon, Hyojin and Orochimaru left the underground base of Danzo. When they came to the surface, Hyojin looked at the village in the distance and asked Orochimaru, How long has it been since Danzo fought with a strong person? Orochimaru immediately understood what Hyojin meant and said with a smile, It should be about 8 or 9 years. After staying in the dark for so long, he might not be able to adapt to the sunlight. Whether it is Hyojin or Orochimaru, the reason why they are willing to wholeheartedly help Danzo improve the Chimera technique is not only because they want to use Danzo as a guinea pig, but also because Danzo has lost the heart of a strong person. He has forgotten that he is first a ninja, and second is the elder of Mai. Such an old guy, even if the Chimera technique is improved, allowing him to complete the Kekkei Genkai ceremony in a better state, his strength is not enough to make people fear him. He still hasn't realized that the shinobi world is different from before. With that said, Hyojin jumped, and a pair of black iron sand wings spread behind him, and flew towards Mai in the dim sunset. Orochimaru grinned. There will be a good show to watch. Worried about Yu's safety, Hyojin quickly flew to Mai. At this time, the sun was already setting, leaving only a touch of dim afterglow on the horizon, but the dusk of the evening didn't affect Suijin's vision. Standing on the broken outer wall, he looked at the two monsters who were in the middle of fighting. On one side is one of the Sannin of Mai, Jiraiya, and his summoned beast, Bunta Toad, while on the other side is a monster with black wings and a ferocious face. Isn't this the monster from the Box of Bliss? The Akatsuki and the Kusanagi village have joined hands? After recognizing the culprit who attacked Mai, Hyojin frowned. Hyojin has some impression of this monster named Satoshi. This monster seems to be able to see through people's minds, and any attack that is full of killing intent towards it will be avoided by it. Hyojin observed for a moment, and found that no matter what kind of attack Jiraiya and Bunta Toad launched, they really could not hurt it at all. Then, Hyojin noticed the big iron box on the ground with the 4 sides carved with strange faces, and said, That should be the Box of Bliss. In his field of vision, the Box of Bliss was emitting a strong evil chakra. This evil chakra was constantly emitting a soul-shaking resonance, as if it was attracting the desires of the people around it. Many of the villagers who did not manage to evacuate in time gradually lost their nature under the influence of this evil chakra. Like puppets being controlled, they slowly lined up and walked towards the Box of Bliss. Boom! Suddenly, Bunta Toad's hind leg was grabbed by Satoshi's sharp claws, and it was flung out, crashing heavily onto the ground and flipping over the whole street. At this time, Satoshi, who was flying in the air, condensed a ball of chakra light similar to the truth-seeking ball between its pair of sharp claws, and then shot it towards Bunta Toad, who had fallen to the ground. Boom! Another loud sound, and Bunta Toad, who was hit by the ball of chakra, let out a muffled groan, and green smoke billowed from his back. Hyojin did not mind helping the village, but the prerequisite was that the safety of Bell, Ziyuan, and Ningxi's relatives or disciples was guaranteed, so he did not immediately intervene in the battle in front of him. Instead, he was prepared to confirm the safety of his relatives and friends. If time allowed, he was also prepared to change back to his Yin body, and then find a chance to intervene. But just as Hyojin was about to leave, he saw a large group of Mai ninjas rushing over from the corner of his eye. The person leading them was none other than one of Mai's 3 ninjas, Tsunade Haim. What surprised him the most was that Bell, who only had the strength of a mid-level ninja, was also in the group. Satoshi, who was already a little annoyed by Jiraiya's pestering, realized that Mai's reinforcements were coming, and without a word, he glided over. In the dim sky, Satoshi, who was like a huge shadow falling from the sky, instantly broke through the formation of Tsunade Haim and the others. Its sharp claws were like a plow blade, drawing a long ravine on the ground. Any Mai ninja who tried to stop it were crushed into meat paste by its long claws. Seeing the huge claws approaching, Bell, who was in the group, was stunned. Not far away, Tsunade Haim wanted to help, but the flesh and blood flying around her made her body weak, and she could not muster any strength. Clang! Just as Satoshi's claws were about to fall on Bell, a huge black iron spear fell from the sky and landed in front of Bell, blocking Satoshi's claws for her. Chapter 468. The sudden appearance of the black iron spear not only blocked Satoshi's surprise attack, but also attracted the attention of everyone present. Immediately afterward, a figure followed closely behind and landed on the top of the black iron spear. Amatsukami? The group of Mai ninjas looked at the newcomer and saw that the newcomer was wearing a black robe with golden edges and a mask with a gale pattern on his face. This is the attire of Amatsukami. Sitting on the ground, Kuroto also stared blankly at the strange figure standing on the black iron spear. She was still scared by the scene just now. Standing on the top of the black iron spear, Hyojin glanced at Yui without a trace. He heaved a sigh of relief in his heart when he saw that Bell was only slightly frightened and didn't suffer any injuries. Then, he cursed in his heart, "Damned girl, didn't I tell you not to participate in dangerous battles? You actually dared to come forward in such a fierce battle? Do you want to die? Humph, see how I'll deal with you when I get back." Originally, Hyojin could hide in the dark and let the village deal with the Akatsuki members first, then choose a suitable time to deal a heavy blow to either Nagato or Obsidian with a sneak attack, or even kill one of them. But Yui's situation forced him to hastily intervene in the battle. As a result, Kuroto, who originally had the initiative, suddenly jumped into the light and entered the field of vision of both the village and Akatsuki, falling into a passive position. But since he has already taken action, there's no point in regretting or being upset, so after pondering for a while, Kuroto immediately sneered at the surrounding Mai ninjas. "TSK, what a bunch of trash. Don't tell me that the village of Mai, the head of the 5 great shinobi villages, only has such little strength?" At this time, Tsunade struggled to stand up and frowned slightly. "Are you from Amatsukami?" Hyojin's eyes slightly narrowed as he glanced at Tsunade. There is no doubt that Tsunade is suffering from hemophobia at the moment and can't use her strength at all. If it weren't for Hyojin's help, she wouldn't even be able to save her disciple. But it is undeniable that Tsunade's symptoms are much lighter than Hyojin expected. In the original spacetime, before Tsunade overcame her phobia, she would basically collapse at the sight of blood. At this time, blood and flesh were flying around her, and it was a mess. However, she was able to grit her teeth and stand up, and her consciousness was very clear. She could observe the changes in the situation on the battlefield. It could be seen that she had already begun to try to overcome her phobia. In fact, after returning to the village, Tsunade, who realized that sooner or later there will be a battle with Akatsuki of Akatsuki, has begun to try to overcome her phobia. And after a period of overcoming, a little bit of blood no longer affected her, which was why she led a team to support Jiraiya. However, no one expected that Satoshi would be so difficult to deal with. As soon as he appeared, blood and flesh splattered everywhere, and the most bloody scene was displayed in front of her, making it difficult for her to bear for a while. At this time, Akatsuki, who was flying in the air, suddenly flapped his wings, and in an instant, countless sharp black feathers, accompanied by a whistling sound, attacked the ground. Hyojin frowned and immediately waved his right hand. Under the influence of the magnetic release chakra, the black iron sand floating around Suijin's body immediately turned into a giant shield, protecting everyone's head. Ding ding dang dang, Akatsuki's feathers hit the iron sand giant shield, and a burst of metal impacts sound was heard. Quick, treat the injured companions. After instructing several disciples around her, Tsunade turned to Hyojin and asked, "Why are you helping us? What is your Akatsuki's purpose?" Looking at Belle, who disregarded her own safety to treat the injured people around her, Hyojin's face sank and said to Tsunade, "Help you? Humph, I just think that this monster is a little interesting." After saying that, Kuroto carefully controlled the iron sand ball to move Hyuga and the injured Konoha ninjas to a safe distance while being vigilant of Satoshi, who was flying in the air. Seeing that the black iron sand swept away many injured my ninjas, Tsunade asked, "What are you going to do?" Hyojin deliberately said coldly, "Tell these wastes to go away, don't get in my way." You. Tsunade was a little annoyed. Although she experienced the heavy blow of the death of her brother and lover, her sense of belonging to Mai was not as strong as before, but seeing Mai being looked down upon like this, she couldn't help but be annoyed. But on second thought, evacuating the injured and the weak Mai ninjas was indeed the right choice at the moment, so she ordered the Mai ninjas around her. "Jonin, stay, the others evacuate." Bang! At this time, Jiraiya, who was buried in the ruins not far away, jumped out, panting, and shouted to Tsunade, "Be careful of that monster, it can read minds, it can see through all our attacks." The injured toad said weakly, "In the face of this monster, we have no chance of winning at all." Damn it! Tsunade looked up at Satoshi, who was flying in the sky, clenching her fists tightly. The tragic situation of the village, and her companions who died around her, were urging her to get rid of the influence of hemophobia on her body. At this time, Satoshi, who was flying in the air, let out a burst of strange laughter. "Do you feel fear? You small insects, how dare you try to resist me, it's ridiculous." Insects? Standing on the top of the black iron spear, Hyojin's face gradually turned cold. Then, he took out a storage scroll from the storage bag around his waist, then gently shook it in the air, put his hands together, and shouted, "Open!" Voila! Amidst the white smoke, countless black iron sand poured out from the storage scroll in the air like a sand waterfall. Kuroto won't make the same mistake twice. Previously, because he didn't prepare enough iron sand, he was tricked by the impure earth physique and Hashirama Dame-sama. After learning this lesson, whenever he uses the Type A wind release clone body, he always carries a storage scroll specifically for storing iron sand. After he had enough iron sand, Hyojin made a seal with his hands and shouted, "Magnetic escape, iron sand rain." Swish, swish, swish! In an instant, the huge iron sand turned into iron sand grains as thick as a finger, like raindrops, shooting toward Satoshi, who was in the air. Tsunade's face was filled with joy. With such a large area of attack, with its size, it should not be able to dodge it no matter what. However, before the joy on Tsunade's face could completely spread, it froze. This was because Satoshi, who was flying in the air, had dodged all the iron sand grains at an unbelievable speed. Ha ha! Satoshi's arrogant laughter echoed in the sky above the entire village, as if it was mocking the entire my village. As expected, it still doesn't work. Hyojin, whose expression did not change, glanced into the distance and thought to himself, "I hope the backup plan that I arranged will work." Chapter 469. Rumble. Listening to the continuous roars coming from my village in the distance, Obsidian, who was standing on a high cliff, smirked. "Hey, Kusanagi village is really unexpectedly capable." Nagato, who was standing quietly on the side, had a cold look in his eyes. Since the transplantation of the first-generation cells and the fusion of the immortal body of the Whirlpool clan and the immortal body of the Thousand Hand clan, Nagato has completely said goodbye to his wooden cart and can walk on his own feet. At this time, Conan, who was observing from the air, slowly landed on the ground and said to Nagato, "The monster that ran out of the box of bliss destroyed a large part of the outer wall of my village, and has already broken into the village." Nagato said lightly, "There is an aura on that monster that makes me feel disgusted." Obsidian shrugged. "Isn't my village being trampled on the most what you want to see the most?" Nagato was silent. Suddenly, Zetsu poked his body out of the ground, and the other half of Zetsu complained, "Oh, why do I have to do such dangerous things every time? The monster that ran out of that box is not ordinary." Zetsu, who launched the red mist technique, not only could freely travel underground, but he could also restrain all his aura. He was the best candidate for investigation, so he has been following behind Goku and observing Goku's attack on Mai from a close distance. Not ordinary? How can it be? Disdainfully curling his lips, Obsidian said casually, "How did Mai deal with it?" Zetsu replied, "Mai first sent one of the three ninjas, Jiraiya, but Jiraiya was no match for that monster. Even if he summoned the big toad, he was still no match for that monster." When Nagato heard this, he looked at Zetsu with a little surprise. As a disciple, he was very clear about Jiraiya's strength. Together with Mount Myaboku's Bunta the Toad, Jiraiya was definitely a shadow-level expert. He could even fight a tailed beast head-on. Yet, such a powerhouse was no match for the monster that came out of the box of bliss. This made Nagato think highly of the monster. Obsidian also smiled. "It was just a casual test. I didn't expect the effect to be so good. It seems that we have underestimated the foundation of the Kusanagi village." At this time, Obsidian also realized that the monster that came out of the box of bliss was indeed not ordinary. Baiju continued, "Then Tsunade, one of Mai's Sannin, also joined the battle, but she looked a little strange. It seemed that she was injured or something else. In short, she was not in a good state and was of little help to the battle." Then, Amatsukami took action. As soon as they heard the words Amatsukami, whether it was the indifferent Nagato or the playful Obsidian, the expressions on their faces became solemn. Nagato said, "Amatsukami really colluded with Mai." When the three great ninja villages joined forces to raid the Rain Village last time, Amatsukami suddenly intervened, which made Nagato faintly feel that Amatsukami must have colluded with Mai in private. This time, he arranged for the Kusanagi village to attack Mai with the intention of testing the waters, but he didn't expect that Amatsukami would really jump out as he expected. Obsidian restrained the smile on his face and asked in a deep voice, "Who sent Amatsukami?" Hakuja replied with a hint of concern, "It's the guy with the wind pattern on his mask, and he used magnet release." Conan, who was in charge of intelligence analysis, took over the conversation and said, "The member of Amatsukami who used magnet release, his code name is currently unknown, and his battle record is very few. The only confirmed battle record is that he teamed up with Amatsukami's Homasubi and fought against Kumo's AB, and Amatsukami was defeated. He should be the weakest member of Amatsukami, right?" After a pause, Obsidian suppressed his impulse and said, "Letting such a guy show up is likely to be a bait deliberately released by Amatsukami. We shouldn't act rashly." Nagato nodded cautiously. Seeing Nagato nod, Conan turned to Zetsu and said, "Pay close attention to the battlefield. As soon as there is any news of Amatsukami's leader Yama, immediately report to us." The masked man added, "If Balrog appears, notify us immediately as well." In Amatsukami, the most feared members of the Akatsuki are their leader Yama and Homasubi, who possesses the Manjikyu Sharingan. In contrast, even Suijin, who is comparable to the three generations Naruto, Nagato and Obsidian don't care much about him. As for the unknown magnet release ninja, they don't care about him at all. My village, Naruto building. Looking at the rising smoke in the distance and listening to the constant noise echoing in their ears, The faces of the three generations are extremely gloomy. Standing on the side, the elite jonin of the Kusanagi village, Tatsuru, looked nervous. No one expected that the monster that came out of the box of bliss would be so powerful that even one of the Sannin, Jiraiya, couldn't deal with it, and even after sending Tsunade, they still couldn't suppress it. It must be known that Jiraiya and Tsunade are the strongest cards that the three generations can play. In the estimation of the three generations, Jiraiya and Tsunade are not only responsible for repelling the Akatsuki's attack using the Kusanagi village's radical faction, but they also have to deal with the Akatsuki's subsequent offensive, draw out the Akatsuki's leader, Nagato, and create the conditions for the 5 Kage to attack Nagato. Yes, the three generations didn't hesitate to use the Kusanagi village as a battlefield to deal with the Akatsuki organization once and for all, directly kill Nagato, and retrieve or destroy the Rinnegan in Nagato's eye sockets that contain the power of the Sage of the Six Paths. But things have deviated from the expectations of the three generations from the very beginning. The so-called box of bliss that can revive the Kusanagi village actually hides such a terrifying monster. Even when Jiraiya and Tsunade joined forces, they were still at a disadvantage, and the Akatsuki organization hasn't even officially appeared yet. At this time, Tatsuru couldn't stay any longer and stepped forward. Naruto-sama, the Kusanagi village is willing to help me deal with that monster. The three generations shook their heads. You can't show up yet. As a high-level Kusanagi, if Ryum suddenly appears in Konoha, then the Akatsuki will most likely guess that their attack plan has already been leaked to Konoha by the Kusanagi village, and they will definitely be prepared for it. At that time, the effect of the Kage attack will be greatly reduced. Tatsuru is also aware of the worries of the three generations, so he could only sigh. He is now extremely glad that the Kusanagi village hasn't been able to open the box of bliss in the past few decades, otherwise the entire Kusanagi village would have turned into a bloody purgatory overnight. The three generations looked into the distance and thought, we can only place our hopes on Amatsukami, but why did they send that magnetic release ninja, their leader Yama? Chapter 470. On the battlefield. In order to prevent the monster Goku from advancing further into the village, Hyojin also used the magnetic release to fly into the air and started a fierce chase with Goku in the air. In terms of size, Hyojin was naturally far inferior to the monster Goku. However, because of the magnetic release, the black iron sand flying in the sky could be seen as an extension of Hyojin's body, so in terms of momentum, he was a notch above Goku. Swish, swish, one in front and one behind, one chasing and one fleeing, two black shadows constantly entangled in the dark sky. At this time, the sun had completely set, and the night sky was faintly dotted with stars. The sky above the village was filled with Goku's strange laughter and the whistling sound of the black iron sand flying. Because Hyojin, who could fight in the air, had delayed Goku, most of the villagers had successfully entered the shelter, but the casualties could not be completely avoided, and the screams and wails on the street were still incessant. At this time, Hyojin, who was in the air, crossed his hands and suddenly pulled. Under the urging of his magnetic release chakra, countless black iron sand turned into dozens of black clouds, sweeping towards Goku from different directions. The dozens of black clouds formed by the iron sand intertwined in the air, as if weaved into a boundless giant net, covering the sky and earth as it looked towards Goku. Ha ha ha! While laughing wildly, Goku's figure flashed, and with almost ghostly movements, he avoided all the iron sand clouds that were attacking him. He was slippery like a loach in the mud. However, in order to avoid the iron sand clouds that covered the sky and earth, he had to reduce his flying altitude, flying close to the ground and skimming over a wide long street. Now, suddenly, Tsunade shouted and jumped down from a tall building on the street. She fiercely punched Satoshi, who was galloping past. Goku, who should have been hit by the punch, brushed past Tsunade at an almost impossible angle, still laughing wildly as he flew to the end of the street. At this time, a huge figure flashed from the end of the street. It is Jiraiya's psychic ninja beast Bunta Toad. Seeing Goku pouncing over, Bunta the Toad used a frog jump to meet him. The long saber in his hand shone under the illumination of the surrounding flames, emitting bursts of cold light. Swish! Toad Bunta's long sword slashed out with a sharp whistle. This long-planned strike was as fast as lightning. Many of the my ninjas around didn't even see it clearly before this sharp strike slashed out with the force of thunder. Even so, Wu dodged the attack without any mishap, just like before. At this time, when Tai, who was passing by, suddenly opened his mouth without any warning. His slender tongue suddenly stuck out, and in the dim light, it turned into a shadow and attacked Wu. "It's useless, ha ha!" Wu seemed to have expected this. His body suddenly rose, and once again avoided Toad Bunta's tongue. But when Tai didn't immediately retract his tongue, instead, he stretched out his tongue to the limit, revealing Jiraiya, who had entered the Sage mode, and Fukasaku and Shima on Jiraiya's shoulder. Super Jiruken! With the inertia of Toad Bunta's tongue, Jiraiya jumped, and the Rasengan in his hand quickly became bigger. Like a comet in the night sky, it shot towards Goku. Goku's wings flapped, and his whole body flew into the sky, narrowly avoiding Jiraiya's Super Jiraiya. Still not enough? Not far away, Hyojin saw this scene and frowned slightly. Tsunade and Jiraiya cooperated in this set of 4 consecutive attacks, and each of them was a killing move, especially the last Jiraiya hidden on the tip of Toad Bunta's tongue. However, such a sharp combination of attacks still couldn't hurt Wu in the slightest. Looking at Goku, who was laughing unscrupulously in the air, Hyojin secretly said, "If I can't hit it, no matter how powerful the move is, it won't have any effect." To deal with Goku, the heart can't be filled with extreme emotions such as fear, anxiety, and other extreme emotions, and also can't have the slightest malice. Otherwise, all of them will be sensed by Goku first. In other words, only people with a pure heart and no malice can hit it. Of course, Kuroto isn't afraid of Satoshi, but he can't do it without malice in his attacks. Or to be more precise, no normal person can do this. Looking at Goku wreaking havoc over the village, shooting a rain of feathers from time to time, causing a large number of killings, Tsunade and Jiraiya couldn't help but feel angry. Hyojin's mentality is relatively calm, because he is very clear about Goku's strength. In the original story, almost all of Konoha's elites were sent out. Yondaime Hokage Tsunade personally led the team. The elite Jonin Kakashi, Guy and Yamato were all present, plus the 12 roaches of Konoha that have already grown up, and the Cloud Yatsubi's Jinchuriki Chiguru is at its peak. Such a lineup is more than enough to capture a great shinobi village, but they still couldn't do anything to the monster Satoshi. If it wasn't for Naruto discovering Goku's weakness and encouraging his father Wu-Wei to use the secret technique Grand Fire Heavenly Prison to imprison Goku, the final result would be hard to say. Even so, after the battle, Naruto was seriously injured and died. If it wasn't for Dragon Tongue using his own blood limit forbidden technique Dragon Life Reincarnation, which gave his life to Naruto, the Sage of the Six Paths might have personally come to save him. At this time, Goku slowly landed on the box of bliss and changed his tone. "You can't imagine the world inside. In the endless darkness, my will was crushed little by little, and my feelings were arbitrarily controlled. It wasn't until I killed my father with my own hands that I was freed. Nothing can bind me anymore. It's so comfortable." Flying in the air, Hyojin's eyes narrowed, and he secretly said, "My guess is right, it has a weakness." On the cliff where the box of bliss was opened in the Kusanagi village, Caw-Caw, accompanied by a few crow caws, a black crow with shiny feathers, landed on Wu-Wei's body, who was lying in a pool of blood. Not long after, black iron sand swept over like a dense swarm of bees and landed on the cliff, gradually transforming into the appearance of Hyojin's Type A wind-release clone. I've been looking for it for so long, so it's here. This iron sand doppelganger was the backup plan that Kuroda had prepared beforehand. After discovering that the monster that attacked the village was Satoshi, Kuroda separated an iron sand doppelganger to look for Wu Wei, who was the one who opened the box of bliss. The reason why he firmly believed that it was Wu Wei who opened the box of bliss was mainly because there weren't many elite jonin in the Kusanagi village, and there were only a few candidates among the radicals who could open the box of bliss. In addition, 3 generations had learned about the Akatsuki organization's plan to attack Mai in advance, so there must be a traitor among the radicals in the Kusanagi village. The only one who was qualified to open the box of bliss and had a reason to betray the radicals in the Kusanagi village was Wu Wei, who deeply regretted sacrificing his son. Chapter 471. Rumble. The roar passed through the thick layer of soil and reached the shelter that was more than 10 meters deep underground. Amidst the waves of tremors, the rows of lights in the shelter flickered, causing people's minds to be in a mess. Some fine dust also fell from the gaps at the top, causing the children who breathed it into their nostrils to sneeze. At this time, another group of people entered the shelter. The leader is an old man of the Hyuga clan. From his clean forehead, it can be seen that he is a member of the noble Hyuga clan, and behind him are the old, weak, women, and children of the Hyuga clan who need to take refuge. Among them, the only one who was in the prime of his life was disabled in a wheelchair, but his expression was calm, completely without the fear and uneasiness on the faces of others. Because it was a large shelter within the scope of the village, the shelter was very crowded, and the Hyuga clan had to disperse and find a place to stay. Seeing this, Azui, who entered the shelter first, quickly gave up her position and said to Hinata, "Miss, come here quickly, there is an empty seat here." Because of Hyojin, Ziyuan was very close to the Hyuga clan. She, who had nothing to do, would run to the clan's land every 2 or 3 days. Her relationship with Hinata was very good, so as Ziyuan's attendant, Azui was very respectful to Hinata. Hinata hurriedly waved his hand. No need, I can just squat on the side." "You are the miss of the clan, how can I let you squat on the side?" Saying that, Azui urged Hinata to sit in her seat. After sitting down, Hinata looked at Ziyuan, who was hugging her knees and curling up into a ball, still shivering, and suddenly wondered, "Ziyuan, what's wrong with you? Are you sick?" Without waiting for Ziyuan to answer, Naruto, who happened to be sheltering on the opposite side, shouted, "Do you even need to ask? She's obviously scared." Ziyuan raised her head that was buried in her knees, wanting to tell her good friend Hinata about the horrible scenes she saw in the death prophecy, but thinking of Hyojin's previous instructions, she could only hold it back. Sasuke, who was squeezed with Naruto, snorted softly, "She's so scared in the shelter, so useless." Pa. As soon as Sasuke's voice fell, Sasuke's mother, who was sitting next to Sasuke, knocked his head. Impolite. Seeing Sasuke being defeated, Naruto immediately covered his mouth and snickered. Sasuke whispered to himself, "Humph, those bad guys are too cunning, they even sneak attacked the village while brother and brother Jishue were out training. If brother and brother Jishue were in the village, inside the underground base of the original route." In a luxurious hall, 5 people were sitting around a round conference table. They were Cloud Village's 4 generations Laying, Sand Crypsis's 4 generations of Kazekage, Mist Village's 4 generations Mizukage, Rock Village's 3 generations Tsuchikage, and Mai's advisory elder, Mito Hamura. Each of the Kage's guards stood behind their respective Kage. Including the 4 Kages and the guards, there were a lot of people in this hall, but at the moment it was extremely quiet, no one spoke, only the faint rumbling sound coming from outside. Sandaime-sama is very shrewd. After inviting the 4 Kage to Konoha, he told the whole story truthfully. Although they realized that they were being used, No matter which Kage, they had to admit that this was a good opportunity to deal with the Akatsuki leader, so after a short discussion, the 4 Kages agreed to 3 generations' request to attack the Akatsuki leader Nagato at the critical moment and get rid of the Akatsuki once and for all. After a long time, the rumbling sound outside still showed no signs of subsiding. 4 generations Mizuki Yagura couldn't help but say, "Haven't you found a way to restrain that monster yet?" 3rd Tsuchika Inoki joked in a tone of an elder, "Young people really can't keep their cool." For Inoki, it's not his village that was being ravaged, so he wasn't worried at all. In his opinion, it's best to take advantage of this opportunity to consume more of Mai's energy. Naturally, Yagura didn't care about my village. He just heard that some members of Amatsukami were fighting with the monster outside, so he was a little concerned about the situation of Amatsukami's members outside. 4 generations Laying also asked Mitoki Hamura, "Is there any agreement between your my village and Amatsukami that we don't know about?" Mitoki Hamura shook his head. The grumpy 4 generations Laying immediately asked, "Then why would they help your my village?" 3 generations Tsuchikage also interjected, "Regarding this matter, your my village must give us a reasonable explanation." Mitoki Hamura replied, "The appearance of Amatsukami's members was also unexpected to our my village. This wasn't part of our plan at all. The intelligence team's analysis is that this is related to the secret competition between Amatsukami and Akatsuki." Yandame Kazekage gently patted the conference table with his own puppet prosthesis. "Everyone, don't quarrel anymore. If we lose this battle, the 5 great shinobi villages will become history, so these disputes should wait until after the war is over." 4 generations Laying snorted heavily and said no more. The others also tacitly stayed silent. The battle on the ground continued. Unable to cause any damage to Amatsukami village, my village can only choose to passively defend. Therefore, more and more blocks were destroyed, and the area affected by the battle was getting larger and larger, gradually spreading towards the central area of the village. After another fruitless attack, Jiraiya panted heavily and asked Hyojin loudly, "Hey, do you have any idea?" For him, although Amatsukami is strange and unpredictable, and it is difficult to distinguish between friend and foe, but as a temporary teammate, for some reason, the people of Amatsukami always give him an inexplicable sense of reliability. At this time, a mass of black iron sand flew from the distance and landed in front of Tsunade. After the iron sand dispersed, the thing wrapped inside was revealed. It turned out that the iron sand wrapped a man with a chest injury, and this man was none other than Udo, who opened the box of bliss. The scattered iron sand gathered again and transformed into the appearance of Hyojin Type A wind meld clone. He hurriedly ordered Tsunade, who has a puzzled look on her face, "Hurry up and treat him. He is the key to defeating this monster." Tsunade glanced at the injured man in front of her and immediately asked Hyojin Iron Sand Clone, "Who is he?" Just when Hyojin Iron Sand Clone was about to answer, Amatsukami, who is in the air, seemed to have also sensed Udo's aura. Realizing something, it suddenly pounced on Amatsukami. Hyojin Iron Sand Clone descended from the sky. While dispersing the Iron Sand Clone, he waved his hand. In an instant, countless black iron sand gathered together and formed a solid black iron round pot, trapping Tsunade and the injured Udo inside, protecting them. Then, Hyojin spread the black iron wings on his back and stood in front of the round pot like an angel of the night. He coldly said to Amatsukami, "Your opponent is me." Chapter 472. Ding ding ding. After easily blocking Goku's feather attack, Hyojin's mouth curled up. The black iron sand around him was like a large moving black cloud. No matter what angle Goku attacked from, he couldn't break through this moving barrier. Hyojin really couldn't hit Goku, but at the same time, Goku couldn't break through his defense either. Wu flew into a rage out of humiliation and shouted, Damn, you tiny insect! Woo 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 woo! Following Goku's hysterical shout, the box of bliss in the distance resonated with a whine that sounded like the wind and a cry. A suffocating evil chakra spread out from the box. This dark purple evil chakra was like tentacles that spread out in all directions, spreading to every corner of the village. When the dark purple chakra came into contact with the injured villagers or the corpses of the dead villagers, the eyes of these villagers or corpses immediately turned red, and they madly attacked all living things around them. In an instant, the whole Mai was in a commotion. In the Uchiha clan's land, Fuyue crossed his arms in front of his chest and stood quietly on the roof of the police building. Around him were dozens of heavily armed Uchiha clansmen. Swish, at this time, a figure landed beside Fuyue and reported, "Patriarch, Naruto-sama ordered us to continue to be vigilant and guard against the Akatsuki's surprise attack." Fuyue nodded. Although Goku was wreaking havoc in the village, the power of Mai was not completely affected by this monster. For example, the Umbu under Naruto, the police force in charge of the Uchiha clan, and the ninjas of the major clans did not rush to join the battle. Instead, they were distributed in various key areas of the village to guard against the Akatsuki's surprise attack. Looking at Goku flying in the distance, Fuyue thought, the Akatsuki's attack is already so difficult to deal with, I don't know what will happen next. All of a sudden, a commotion broke out. A large group of villagers, whose eyes were glowing with red light, crazily rushed towards Uchiha's territory. Fugaku stared at the crazed villagers with his scarlet Sharingan and ordered coldly, "Second team, attack." Swish, following Fuyue's order, more than 10 Uchiha elites turned into shadows and charged towards the villagers who were controlled by the Box of Bliss Hyuga clan's territory. Bang bang bang, after a series of slaps, 7 to 8 villagers controlled by the Box of Bliss fell to the ground at the same time. Hayashi heaved a sigh of relief and retracted his stance. Then, he looked around. Because the Hyuga clan's land is closer to the center of the village than the Uchiha clan's land, so the impact here is also earlier. But under the attack of the Hyuga clan's experts, the crazy villagers who rushed into the Hyuga clan's land were not many, and a large number of them were lying on the street. At this time, Richa came over and said, "The brains of these villagers have been completely destroyed, there is no saving them." Hayashi gently nodded. He also has the Byakugan, so naturally, he has already discovered this. Richa glanced at Goku in the distance and asked again, "Is there any new order from Naruto-sama? Is there really no need to support the battlefield over there?" Hayashi said with a solemn face, "That monster is not something that can be dealt with by numbers." On the main road leading to the Naruto building, the 7th squad of Umbu stationed here was also attacked by the crazy villagers. Standing in the middle of the street, Kurenai quickly printed with her hands and shouted, "Genjutsu, Sakura Naruto technique." As Kurenai's genjutsu was activated, countless cherry blossom petals fell from the sky, causing the crazy villagers to be at a loss. One by one, they lost their aggression and stood there in a daze. Hyojin's shadow clone, who stayed in the 7th squad, gave an order, "Kill them." Gale was shocked and said, "But they are all ordinary villagers." Hyojin's shadow clone shook his head and explained, "Their brain structure has long been destroyed, there is no saving them, and many of them are corpses." After listening to Hyojin's explanation, Gale and Shien no longer hesitated. They immediately waved their long swords and harvested the villagers who were controlled by the Box of Bliss. After releasing the genjutsu, Kurenai looked into the distance absent-mindedly. She knew that Kamikaze of Amatsukami was fighting fiercely with the monster that was wreaking havoc in the village, on the battlefield. Seeing that Goku was getting more and more hysterical, Hyojin felt more confident. This was because Goku's performance had undoubtedly proved that his method was correct. Not far away, Jiraiya naturally noticed this as well. He directly leaped onto the top of the iron sand round pot. Being in sage mode, he was the same as Hyojin. Although he could not hit Goku, he was not afraid of Goku's attack. Standing on top of the iron sand round pot, Jiraiya was distracted and looked around. At this time, Master Fukasaku on his shoulder said, "Little Jiraiya, don't be distracted. Don't forget that this is my. Those ordinary villagers controlled by the Box of Bliss won't be able to cause much damage." On the other shoulder, Master Shima said, "Yes, I can sense that the villagers controlled by the evil chakra are rapidly decreasing. Don't worry about those things and focus on what's in front of you." Jiraiya nodded and focused all his attention on Goku. After fighting for so long, everyone had a rough idea of Goku's strength. Aside from the special ability to sense fear and malice, Goku's combat strength was only at the level of an ordinary tailed beast. Moreover, it was obviously not as strong as the strongest tailed beasts, the 9 tails and the 8 tails. Among the 9-tailed beasts, Goku was probably ranked in the middle. The main reason why Goku was so difficult to deal with was that his ability to sense fear and malice was too incomprehensible. In addition, he could fly and had very high mobility. Therefore, Hyojin believed that the legend of Goku destroying several countries during the Warring States period was very likely to be true. Because as long as he could not be restrained, he was almost invincible. After a while, Tsunade's voice came from under the iron sand round pot. "It's done." "So fast?" As expected of Tsunade. After muttering to himself, Hyojin immediately removed the iron sand round pot. As the iron sand fell little by little, the figures of Tsunade and Wu Wei were gradually revealed. At this time, Wu Wei's face was haggard, and his expression was depressed. His eyes were completely devoid of the spirit that an elite Jonin should have. His whole person was like a walking corpse. In this regard, Hyojin could understand. For the sake of the dream that he pursued all his life, he sacrificed his only son, but in the end, he found out that this dream was nothing but a scam. The Box of Bliss couldn't satisfy his wish, nor could it bring back his son. Retracting his wings, Hyojin landed beside Wu Wei and said lightly, "Hey, don't you want to free your son?" Chapter 473. After hearing the word son, Wu Wei regained some consciousness and looked at Hyojin. Hyojin pointed at Wu, who was flying through the air, and sighed. "I guess you don't want your son to always look like this, right? It's disgusting to look at him." Wu Wei denied excitedly. "No, he's not Wu Go." Hyojin controlled the iron sand to block the feathers that Wu was crazily shooting at him. He said calmly, "Why do you have to lie to yourself? You know he's your son." Hyojin's calm tone made Wu Wei powerless to argue. In the end, he lowered his head. "Yes, his hatred for me is so clear," Hyojin continued. "The world inside the Box of Bliss is no different from hell. Your son has suffered endless torture and attacks inside. Although he has changed, he is still your son. Only you can free him from the control of the Box of Bliss. This is your last chance to make it up to him." Hyojin lied calmly. "Once one enters the Box of Bliss, no one can escape the control of the Box of Bliss. If Kuroto remembers correctly, even if he defeated Satoshi, as the host of Satoshi, Satoshi would only return to the Box of Bliss." However, Hyojin had to lie to Wu Wei. He had to arouse Wu Wei's fighting spirit. Just as Hyojin expected, Wu Wei looked at the ferocious monster in the air, and quickly made up his mind. He forced himself to stand up. At this time, Wu Wei's injuries were much lighter than in the original space-time. First, this was because of Tsunade's treatment. Second, it was because Wu Wei was only 8 or 9 years old. He was much shorter than Wu Wei would have been 10 years later in the original space-time. Because of his height, the strike that pierced through Wu Wei's chest was slightly lower than in the original space-time, so it didn't completely pierce Wu Wei's heart. Seeing Wu Wei stand up, Wu, who was flying in the air, roared, "Why? Why are you not dead?" Hearing Wu's angry roar in the air, Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at each other. The monster can't sense the injured man. This thought instantly surged into their minds. Wu's anger and shock showed that he couldn't sense Wu Wei. If he couldn't even judge whether Wu Wei was dead or alive, he couldn't predict Wu Wei's actions. Although they did not know the reason, Jiraiya and Tsunade both understood that the injured man in front of them was probably the only one who could hit Satoshi. After realizing this, both of them turned to look at Hyojin, who had just rescued Wu Wei. They felt that Amatsukami was even more mysterious than before. Under the mask with the wind pattern, Hyojin's lips curled up. As Wugo's father, Wu Wei has neither the slightest fear of his son who has become a monster, nor will he have any malice towards him. Therefore, he is currently the only person who can crack Satoshi's special ability, and more importantly, he is also an elite Jonin who specializes in confinement. As long as he is given a chance, he can kill Satoshi in one blow. At this time, Wu Wei asked Hyojin, "What should I do?" At this time, there was no longer any hesitation or regret on Wu Wei's face. His eyes were full of determination, and he had regained the calmness that an elite Jonin should have. "Of course, use what you're best at." After a pause, Hyojin continued, "I will create an opportunity for you." After saying that, Hyojin spread the wings behind him and flew into the air again. Previously, because he knew that he couldn't hit Satoshi, Hyojin's movements were very conservative when he was entangled with Satoshi. He mainly focused on stalling and saving his own chakra as much as possible. But now the situation was different. In order to give Satoshi a fatal blow, he had to use all his strength. Smack with a crisp slap, Hyojin put his hands together. Then, all the black iron sand in the sky floated up, forming a huge black curtain that almost covered the entire sky of my village. Looking at the black iron sand covering the sky, Jiraiya's mouth trembled. "Hey, did that guy not use his full strength before?" Tsunade looked at Hyojin in the air with a vigilant face and complained, "Didn't the intelligence say that the strength of this magnet release ninja of Amatsukami is very ordinary? How did you collect the intelligence?" Obviously, it wasn't only Jiraiya and Tsunade who were shocked by the iron sand in the sky. Wu Wei, who was on the ground, was also stunned, and the other ninjas of Mai were even more stunned. Naruto's office. Through the window, 3 generations stared at the iron sand curtain in the sky that covered the entire village and said to the Umbu next to him, "Raise the threat level of this magnet release ninja of Amatsukami. He has the strength to destroy an entire village." Realizing that the situation is not good, Satoshi immediately swooped down and glided to the position of the box of bliss, lifted it with both claws and wanted to escape from Mai. However, just as he grabbed the box of bliss, his body suddenly stopped. Looking down, Satoshi found that the bottom of the box of bliss has long been entangled by countless black iron sand, and was firmly nailed to the ground. "You killed so many of our Mai people, and you still want to escape?" Tsunade shouted and flew up. Satoshi had to give up the box of bliss, flap his wings and fly to the sky, avoiding Tsunade's attack. At this time, Kuroto controlled the iron sand curtain that filled the sky, covering the sky and covering Satoshi in the air. Satoshi can indeed sense fear and malice, and predict the enemy's attack, but after the previous test, Hyojin also found that if the attack frequency is high enough, and the method is clever enough, it can still cause trouble to Satoshi. For example, the previous set of 4 consecutive attacks by Jiraiya and Tsunade almost hit Satoshi. Therefore, Hyojin suspects that if he reaches the strength of the 6th-path realm, he may be able to ignore Satoshi's special ability and directly defeat him. Facing the overwhelming iron sand curtain, Satoshi panicked a little. He flapped his wings in a disorderly manner, and for a moment, he didn't know whether to directly break through the iron sand curtain or avoid it. Hyojin noticed this and thought to himself, "If I fight it with all my strength, I might have a chance of winning." But this thought was fleeting. No one from the Akatsuki organization has appeared, and Hyojin can't fight this monster to the death. Just as Wu was hesitating, a figure suddenly leaped high into the air. In terms of speed, this figure is far inferior to Tsunade, who attacked Satoshi before, but Satoshi's attention was completely focused on the iron sand curtain, and he didn't notice this attack at all. Fire release, Grand Fire Prison. With an indomitable momentum, Wu Wei, who had leaped high into the air, used all his strength to cast the strongest secret technique in his life. Seeing the technique of Grand Fire Prison covering his whole body, Satoshi finally realized it and roared angrily, "Damn it!" Boom! Before Satoshi could finish speaking, Hyojin controlled the giant iron sand fist to hit it, smashing it to the ground. Chapter 474. As soon as Hyojin punched Goku to the ground, the enraged Tsunade leaped up high and punched Goku, who was on the ground. Boom! Another roar suddenly exploded in everyone's ears. After being hit head-on by the angry Tsunade, Goku's huge monster head was fiercely smashed into the ground by the monstrous fist. The entire ground also shattered inch by inch, extending hundreds of meters away. Not far away, Jiraiya and Bunta the Toad staggered and almost fell to the ground because of the cracks on the ground. When Hyojin, who was in mid-air, saw this scene, the corner of his eye twitched unconsciously. He thought to himself, if I was hit by this punch, would I die immediately? The power of the enraged Tsunade's extraordinary strength fist was simply jaw-dropping. Goku's swollen head was directly smashed by the fist and sank deep into the ground. There was no movement for a long time. Jiraiya swallowed his saliva and said, it wouldn't be directly beaten to death, would it? Tsunade rolled up her sleeves, clenched her fists, and spat softly. "TSK, it can't be that weak, right?" Immortal Fukasaku, who was on Jiraiya's shoulder, sensed for a moment and immediately reminded them with a serious face, "It's not dead yet. Don't let your guard down." At this time, Wu Wei walked toward Goku step by step and muttered to himself, "I will personally redeem the mistake I made. Wu Go, I will accompany you on the road to hell." Soon, he stopped in front of Goku's huge and ugly body. He reached out his hand and gently touched Goku's hideous claws. Swoosh! At the moment of contact, Wu Wei retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted. The moment he touched Goku's body, countless dark and evil emotions surged into his body, causing him to feel as if he had fallen into an endless hell. "So you have been enduring this kind of torture. It's my fault. It's my fault." With just a slight touch, Wu Wei felt unbearable. He finally experienced the pain that Wu Go had suffered in the box of bliss. 2 lines of clear tears rolled down his face. "I'll set you free." With that, Wu Wei slowly raised his arms and began to form a seal. Seal. Wu Wei, who had completed the handprint, gave a low cry with tears in his eyes. As Wu Wei activated the Grand Fire Celestial Prison, the technique that bound Wu immediately glowed red. Then, the red light began to burn from the inside out. In the blink of an eye, Wu's huge body was completely swallowed up by the soaring flames. The fire soared into the sky, and under the deep night sky, the entire village was illuminated red. Wu's cries echoed throughout the village. He kept rolling and struggling on the ground, but he couldn't get rid of the Grand Fire Heavenly Prison. The Grand Fire Celestial Prison seemed to be tailor-made for it, as it smashed the arrogant and insufferably arrogant beast into hell. On a high cliff far away from my village. A group of ninjas wearing red cloud clothes, standing or squatting, lined up in a row, looking at Konoha village in the distance where the fire was soaring into the sky. These people were the members of the Akatsuki organization, and the leader was Hirako, who was wrapped in bandages. His hands were hanging naturally, and he stood quietly on the edge of the cliff with a calm expression, as if he was just a traveler enjoying the night scenery. Next to Hirako was Sasori, who was hiding in the Filiu tiger, and Kakuzu, who had his arms crossed in front of his chest. Farther away was Shinichi Uchiha, who was squatting on the ground with a lazy look on his face. Pipa Juzo, dried persimmon, ghost mermaid, lotus, and Sasori, who were part of the mist squad, stood further away. Listening to Wu's cries coming from afar, Hirako said with regret, "Is this the limit?" Sasori said in a cold tone. "That monster is much stronger than I expected. We should have cooperated with it and attacked together." Hirako smiled. "It's okay, it's just an appetizer, it won't affect our plan. No matter how they resist, my will die tonight." Shinichi curled his lips in disdain. At this time, Conan descended from the sky and landed on the cliff. Hirako asked, "Can we move now?" Conan gently nodded. "Recycle the box of bliss, it may be useful in the future. Also, it's best to capture that member of Amatsukami alive. Nagato wants to interrogate him personally." Hirako nodded. "No problem." Conan looked at Hirako and said in a serious tone, "Be careful of Amatsukami." Hirako smiled and said, "Don't worry." Immediately after, Hirako snapped his fingers, and his fusion spirit beast flew to the edge of the cliff. Hirako said to everyone, "Let's move out." The Akatsuki members didn't waste any time and jumped on Hirako's fusion spirit beast. In the village, Mute and Yui, who were supporting each other, slowly walked to the edge of the battlefield. Looking at Wu, who was wailing in the fire, they said with emotion, "It's finally over." At this time, Hyojin landed beside them and said, "It's over? Humph, it's just the beginning." Mute looked at Hyojin with some vigilance. Although this member of Amatsukami has been helping the village to deal with the monster Wu, Amatsukami is still a mysterious organization just like the Akatsuki, so Mute is very wary of Hyojin, who is disguised as an Amatsukami member. Yui, like Mute, also had a vigilant look on her face, but thinking of what happened just now, she said gratefully, "Thank you, Kuroto-san." The strength shown by Kuroto caused Yui to subconsciously use honorifics to address him respectfully. Glancing at Yui casually, Hyojin urged, "I'm afraid there will be a more tragic battle coming. Don't stay here and get in the way, hurry up and take refuge." Mute said, "We are my ninjas, it's our duty to guard the Mai village." Yui also nodded in agreement. Tsunade looked at Kuroto-san. She was a little surprised that this powerful member of Amatsukami would be so kind as to remind his disciple, but she also knew that his reminder was right. Although the monster Wu was restrained, none of the Akatsuki members have shown up yet, so the crisis is far from solved. Whether it is Mute or Yui, their strength is not enough to deal with the current situation, so for them, taking refuge is the best choice. So, Tsunade shouted from afar, "You two go to the shelter immediately, it should be full of injured people now, you can go and help." With Tsunade's order, Mute and Yui no longer insisted and supported each other to go to the shelter. Hyojin also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Yui was on the battlefield, it was difficult for him to concentrate. He always felt that his hands and feet were tied, and it was obviously a big taboo when fighting against a strong enemy. Mobile version of the fastest website, M. Chapter 475. Looking at Mute and Yui's departing figure, especially Mute's figure, Tsunade's heart was full of self-blame. Although Muin had become her disciple a long time ago and had been by her side, she had been depressed at that time. If she wasn't playing around, she was addicted to gambling, so she didn't have the mood to teach Muin. As a result, although Mute had been by her side for many years, the growth of his strength was very limited. So far, he had barely reached the level of a Tokubetsu Jonin. "I'm the one who delayed her." Tsunade sighed in her heart. While Tsunade was sighing, Hyojin flew into the air and observed the surroundings. Logically speaking, Akatsuki should have made a move at this time, but there was still no sign of Akatsuki's members, which made Hyojin a little uncertain. At the same time, he also found that the village's response was very strange. The monster Satoshi destroyed almost half of the village, but the village only sent 2 strong shinobi, Jiraiya and Tsunade. As for Sandaime Sama, the advisory elders of the village, and the patriarchs of the major clans, none of them showed up. Why are they so calm? As soon as he finished cursing, Hyojin frowned as he realized something. Previously, he had been thinking of ways to deal with Wu, so he didn't have extra energy to analyze the situation. Now that he had some free time, he realized that the reason why Akatsuki and the village were so calm was probably because of him. Thinking of this, Hyojin suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Did they think that the entire Amatsuki was hiding behind me, so they had no choice but to not make a move? But he knew that Hyojin didn't have any backup, and the members of Amatsuki didn't exist at all. At this time, Wu's wailing stopped, and the fire on his body also extinguished bit by bit. His body also gradually shrank, and he turned back into an 8 or 9 years old boy. Wu go! Wu Wei quickly walked over. The boy lying in the ruins slowly opened his eyes and said weakly, "Father." Wu Wei hugged Wu Go. "I was wrong. I've let you down." Wu Go pushed his father away and staggered to his feet. Wu Wei shook his head and pleaded, "Son, don't be controlled by the box of bliss anymore. Turn back. This time, no matter where you go, I'll be with you." Wu Go smiled miserably. "I really hope that you could understand this earlier, but it's already too late. I can no longer get rid of it, so as a punishment, please live alone." After Wu Go finished speaking, he forcefully extracted chakra, intentionally activating the Grand Fire Heavenly Prison that was imprisoning him. Those imprisoned in the Grand Fire Celestial Prison would not be able to refine chakra. If they tried to refine it, they would activate the Grand Fire Celestial Prison and be devoured by the flames. Thus, Wu Go turned into a flaming man in an instant. "No!" Wu Wei shouted and was about to pounce forward. However, Wu Go, who had been completely devoured by the flames, turned into a ball of flame and flew back to the box of bliss. Just as Wu Go had said, those who were controlled by the box of bliss could not get rid of it. Even if they were burned to ashes, their spirit bodies would return to the box of bliss and become nutrients for it. When Wu Go returned to the box of bliss, the entrance on the ghostly face of the box of bliss gradually closed. The cries and wails that came from the box of bliss also stopped. Whoosh, the night breeze blew, and the surroundings regained its tranquility. Wu Wei, who had chased after the box of bliss, stared blankly at the box. There was no longer any spirit in his eyes, as though his soul had left with Wu Go. Right at this moment, an inconceivably fast figure suddenly flashed in front of Wu Wei and pierced his chest with a single strike. In midair, Hyojin's eyes turned cold as he said, "You finally showed yourself." On the ground, Tsunade and Jiraiya were surprised. The other party's appearance was too sudden, completely evading their perception. At this time, the figure that suddenly appeared threw Wu Go's body aside, revealing his face. This person was none other than Tsunade and Jiraiya's peer, Hirako. Looking at Wu Go's body on the ground, Hirako curled his lips and said, "What a waste!" "Hirako!" Tsunade's face sank as she shouted, Why did you join the Akatsuki? Did you forget that you are also a my ninja?" Jiraiya also echoed, "It's not too late to stop now, we will help you plead with the old man, don't make the same mistake again. I don't have the slightest nostalgia for this village that doesn't value me." After a pause, Hirako looked back at the closed box of bliss and pressed his hands on it. As Hirako's hands pressed on the box of bliss, the iron sand wrapped around the bottom of the box suddenly fell to the ground. At this time, Hirako suddenly threw the box of bliss into the air, followed by him jumping into the air. Swish, accompanied by the sound of breaking wind, Hirako's fusion spirit beast glided through the air and caught the box of bliss and Hirako. Want to run? Of course, Suijin wouldn't let Hirako take away the box of bliss so easily. With a wave of his hand, the iron sand ball immediately rushed towards Hirako's summoned beast from all directions. Seeing the iron sand surrounding him, Hirako, who was standing on the back of the fusion spirit beast, raised his arms and shouted, "Nether release! Suction hole!" Voila! In an instant, Hirako's palms were like two wind caves, completely absorbing the magnetic release chakra contained in the black iron sand. After losing the control of the magnetic release chakra, the black iron sand in the air immediately fell to the ground. Hirako looked at Hyojin with a playful smile and said, "Do you think that a trivial magnetic release can deal with me?" Hyojin's face sank. The restraint of nether release on ninjutsu is too obvious. Unless it is a highly condensed ninjutsu like Naruto's wind release shuriken, otherwise, ordinary ninjutsu can't do anything to Hirako's nether release. At this time, Hirako spread his arms and released the magnetic release chakra that he had just absorbed. While controlling the iron sand to attack Hyojin, he said with a smile, "I'll let you have a taste of the power of magnetic release." On the ground, Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at each other and decided to join the battle to stop Hirako from taking away the box of bliss. This time, the members of Amatsukami found someone who could restrain Akatsuki, but next time, they might not be so lucky. Therefore, Jiraiya and Tsunade must not allow the box of bliss to fall into the hands of Akatsuki. Boom, 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 but at this time, a series of explosions came from all around the village. Obviously, Hirako was not the only one attacking the village. Chapter 476. Deafening explosions came from almost all directions of the village at the same time. The village, which had just regained its tranquility due to the box of bliss, immediately fell into chaos again. While flying in the air, Hyojin looked around the village. In the vision of the Byakugan, the eastern part of the village was already in chaos. In a narrow area of a few blocks, hundreds of chakra reactions were active at the same time, and these chakra reactions were all connected by chakra lines. He didn't need to guess to know that it must be the Scorpio of the red sand that was performing the performance of 100 machines and wreaking havoc in that area. Compared to the chaos and noise in the east side, the west side was much quieter. But for some reason, a thick fog appeared in the sky above the west side, and the fog was getting thicker and thicker, and the sound of fighting could be heard coming from the fog. There were also battles happening in the land of the Uchiha clan and the Nara clan. Some were blazing, some were exploding, and the movements were not small. Has the Akatsuki launched an all-out attack? Looking around, Hyojin thought to himself, where are the Obsidian and Nagato, and what is their goal? The Akatsuki's attack has already broken out, so Hyojin had to double his vigilance. Beware of Nagato and Obsidian's surprise attack. Especially Obsidian, after getting back his left eye, he already has double Kamui, so he can use Kamui to tear space from a distance without physical contact. Not to mention the bone veins periosteum, even the truth-seeking ball can't resist the Kamui's tearing space, so if he is ambushed, Hyojin will be in great danger. Jiraiya and Tsunade also heard the movements around them. Jiraiya said with a solemn expression, "They have launched an all-out attack." Tsunade stared at Hirako in the sky and said solemnly, "Don't worry about anything else, just get the box of bliss back first, don't let the Akatsuki get it." After saying that, Tsunade jumped on a broken wall and shouted to the surviving My ninjas, "Don't let the Akatsuki organization take away the box of bliss." Yes. The surviving My ninjas responded in unison. After experiencing the nightmarish battle, the survivors understood the consequences of letting the Akatsuki obtain the box of bliss. Hirako sneered and said, "You're overestimating yourself." Swish! Before his voice faded, Hirako's figure disappeared from where he stood. Immediately afterward, he suddenly appeared on the ground and directly pierced the chest of a My ninja with his hardened arm. The process was almost exactly the same as killing Wu-Wei. "You? How could this be? What?" When Hirako pulled out his bloody arm, the surrounding My ninjas finally reacted. The corner of Hirako's mouth curled up, and he directly split into 5 clones, each of which left a long afterimage and rushed towards 5 my ninjas in different positions, instantly replicating the previous attack and beheading all 5 my ninjas. At the same time, the 5 clones disappeared at the same time, as if they were never there. Jiraiya was shocked. White smoke without shadow clone technique, it's not shadow clone technique, it's body flicker technique. Fukasaku-sensei on Jiraiya's shoulder was also shocked. What a fast speed, is this the rapid release Kekkei limit? One must know that the surviving Konoha ninjas on the battlefield at this time, although all of them were injured, but they were at least Tokubetsu Jonin level, so it was unexpected that they couldn't even resist a single move from Hiriko. Damn it! Seeing Hiriko slaughtering his companions from the same village, Tsunade was furious, and without saying any nonsense, she directly swung her fist at Hiriko. Boom! But after hitting Hiriko, Tsunade found that what she hit was only an afterimage left by Hiriko, so she punched the ground, and with a loud bang, a large pit several meters deep appeared on the ground. Not waiting for Tsunade to get up. Swish, accompanied by the sound of breaking wind, Hiriko appeared behind Tsunade. Before Tsunade had time to turn around, Hiriko stabbed Tsunade's back with one hand, piercing through Tsunade's body and out of Tsunade's chest. Puff! Tsunade suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Hiriko grinned and said, "Tsunade, do you feel it? This is the gap between us." Tsunade. In the distance, Jiraiya exclaimed and rushed over. Glancing at Jiraiya, Hiriko smiled and said, "Are you in such a hurry to die?" Just as Hiriko was about to pull back his arm that pierced Tsunade's back to teach Jiraiya a lesson, he suddenly frowned as he found that he couldn't pull his arm out. At this time, Tsunade was coughing up blood while tightly grabbing Hiriko's hand that pierced his chest, turned around and slammed her elbow into Hiriko's head. Pa! Amidst the crisp sound, Tsunade's powerful elbow strike was easily blocked by Hiriko's other arm that was strengthened by steel release. Hiriko, whose eye sockets have turned scarlet, chuckled and said, "The contraction of the muscles in your shoulder blade has long exposed your intentions." With that said, Hiriko kicked Tsunade's back, kicking Tsunade away while pulling out his arm that pierced Tsunade's back. At this time, Jiraiya rushed over and fought with Hiriko. In Sage mode, whether it is speed, strength, reaction, or perception, Jiraiya is outstanding, almost reaching the limit of ordinary people. Moreover, with the help of Shima Fukasaku and Shima on his shoulder, it is not an exaggeration to say that his combat power has doubled. But Hiriko, who has Sharingan Kama rapid release and steel release, is also one of the best in the shinobi world, so he is not afraid of Jiraiya. Boom, 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 the two of them are like two monsters, constantly fighting on the ground, dragging countless afterimages behind them, and each move and style can cause shock waves and loud noises. A moment later, Jiraiya was sent flying by Hiriko's kick. Boom! Amidst a series of loud noises, Jiraiya, who was kicked away, knocked down several buildings in a row before he could stop his body, causing smoke and dust to fill the sky. Hiriko twisted his neck and said, "Is this all the Sage mode can do?" Jiraiya coughed up blood as he crawled out of the ruins. If he was in his peak state, it would be impossible for him to be defeated by Hiriko so quickly, but in the previous battle with Satoshi, not only did he consume a lot of chakra, but he also suffered a lot of injuries, so his condition is very poor. Looking at the injured Tsunade and Jiraiya on the ground, Hiriko laughed heartily and said, "If 3 generations were here, I really want to see what kind of expression he would have now." Clang! As soon as Hiriko's voice fell, the box of bliss, which was supposed to be on the back of the fusion spirit beast, fell from the sky and fell. Then, Hyojin's figure slowly landed and stood on top of the box of bliss. Mobile version of the fastest updated website, M. Chapter 477. Boom! Just as the box of bliss fell from the sky, the summoned beast in the air also fell down with a wail, smashing half of a building. Hiroko frowned and shifted his gaze to Hyojin, who was standing quietly on top of the box of bliss. Although Hyojin had just experienced a battle with Satoshi, he didn't look the least bit disheveled, and the gold-edged black cloak of Amatsukami wasn't even stained with dust. Focusing his gaze on the wind pattern on Hyojin's face, Hiroko sneered, "You didn't escape? The people of Amatsukami are really inexplicably confident." Hyojin didn't answer, but his eyes were cold. In the original world, Hiroko, who failed to successfully complete the Kekii fusion ceremony and barely managed to fuse 4 types of Kekii Genkai, was already able to crush Kakashi's Team 7. A Naruto candidate like Kakashi wouldn't be able to last more than a few moves in his hands. At the last moment, if he hadn't persisted in using Hell Release to absorb Naruto's Wind Release Shuriken, and failed to dodge in time due to his lack of experience, he wouldn't have lost at all. Therefore, at that time, he was already a real Kage-level expert. In this world, Hiroko, who had the support of Akatsuki, successfully completed the Kekii fusion ceremony. Leaving aside the hidden dangers of the demon sprout, he could almost be said to have perfectly fused all 5 types of Kekii Genkai, including the Sharingan. His strength is far from being comparable to him in the original world, and in terms of physical hardware, he is a real Super Kage expert. His only shortcoming, which is the common problem of ordinary researchers, is lack of combat experience. But with one fierce battle after another, this shortcoming of Hiroko is quickly being made up for. Especially in the last battle with Yondaime Laying, he was even able to suppress Yondaime Laying, who has the strongest physical technique among the 5 Kages. Hyojin, who has the same experience, knows very well that with his rich combat experience and proficiency in the use of various Kekii Genkai, Hiroko's combat wisdom has been able to fully exert the strength of his physical hardware. In other words, Hiroko is no longer the same as before, and if he still looks at him with the old standards, his fate will be the same as Tsunade and Jiraiya. Swish, 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 amidst the sound of the wind, many figures arrived at the battlefield. These are the reinforcements of Konoha, including the Umbu directly under the Hokage, as well as ordinary Konoha ninjas, and many of them are acquaintances of Suijin, such as Kakashi, who leads the Special Tactics Team, Team 7 of Umbu, and so on. Unlike when Satoshi attacked the village, Sandaime learned about Satoshi's characteristics through Jiraiya's probing. He knew that the advantage of numbers wouldn't work on this monster, so he didn't send too many reinforcements to the battlefield. But this time, the situation is different. The Mai Shinobi stationed in various areas have become active and launched a full-scale counterattack against the Akatsuki members who attacked the village. Glancing at the Mai Shinobi who came to reinforce the village, Hyojin frowned slightly. The enemy in front of him is Hiroko, and he can use the Sharingan proficiently. Ordinary ninjas don't mean much to him. Only an elite Jonin can pose a real threat to him. Only an elite Jonin can pose a real threat to him. Tsunade-sama. Jiraiya-sama. After discovering the injured Tsunade and Jiraiya on the ground, a commotion broke out among the Mai Shinobi who came to reinforce the village. Obviously, no one expected that the 2 Mai Shinobi would be knocked down by the Akatsuki members. Soon, with the help of the Mai Shinobi, Tsunade and Jiraiya both stood up. Tsunade's injury should have been more serious than Jiraiya's, but at the moment, Tsunade's condition is much better, as if she wasn't the one who was pierced in the chest just now. Jiraiya, on the other hand, has a dispirited look on his face, and because of excessive consumption, he has already exited the Sage mode. The 2 toads are also gasping for breath. Such a good opportunity to attack, but Hiroko didn't take advantage of it. Instead, he looked at all of this with great interest, seemingly enjoying it very much. At this time, Kuroto's figure flashed and jumped to the side of the box of bliss, while looking at Hiroko vigilantly, and asked Hyojin in a very familiar tone, "What's the situation now? Are we that familiar with each other?" After secretly cursing in his heart, Hyojin said, "You came at the right time, I will leave this box to you." Kakashi also came to the side of the box of bliss, glanced at the box and asked, "Is this the box of bliss of the Kusanagi ninja?" Hyojin nodded lightly. He has no interest in the box of bliss. This thing is an ominous thing. Rather than falling into the hands of Akatsuki, it is better to directly throw it to the village for safekeeping. Seeing that Akatsuki has no intention of getting the box of bliss, Kakashi secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then waved at his companions behind him. Soon, several my ninjas came to the side of the box of bliss and tried to move it away. Hirako, who has been silent all this time, suddenly walked towards the box of bliss and said, "Who allowed you to move the box of bliss?" Kuroto was about to step forward with the kunai in her hand, but was stopped by Hyojin. "You are not his opponent." Kuroto asked with a puzzled look, "There are so many of us, why should we be afraid of him?" Swish! Before Kuroto's voice fell, Hirako flashed in front of her and stabbed her in the chest with his hand. This? Looking at Hirako's arm that had been strengthened by the steel release gradually approaching him, the look of surprise on his red face had just faded away, and a bad feeling flashed through his mind, but his body did not have the time to react. Bang! Just as Hirako's arm was about to pierce through Kuroto's chest, his whole body was kicked away by Hyojin from the side. Hirako quickly stood up and glared at Hyojin. "You are courting death." The kick just now was nothing to him. With the strengthening of the steel release, ordinary physical attacks couldn't hurt him at all, but this kick made him very angry, and he felt like he was slapped in the face. At this time, Hyojin said to Kuroto, who had just taken a trip to the gates of hell and was gasping for breath, "Retreat, only I can deal with him." Okay. Kuroto, who knew how powerful Hirako was embarrassed and annoyed at the same time. She responded in a low voice and then retreated reluctantly. On the side, Kakashi suddenly felt a little awkward. He didn't know whether he should help the member of Amatsukami in front of him to deal with Hirako, or retreat with Kuroto. However, Hirako didn't let Kakashi's embarrassment last too long. He said fiercely, "The magnetic release is useless against me, watch how I tear off your limbs one by one." Chapter 478. Humph! With a light snort, Hyojin didn't waste any more time talking nonsense. His figure flashed, and he faced Hirojin head-on. Bang! In an instant, the two figures collided with each other at an extremely fast speed, and a low muffled sound and shock waves spread out at the same time. Collapse! Immediately afterward, the ground under their feet sank due to the huge reaction force, and cracks extended outward, instantly expanding tens of meters away. "Hey, you're quite strong." The corner of Hiruho's mouth curled up, revealing an evil smile. There is no doubt that after the fight, Hiruho has realized that Hyojin's taijutsu is also extraordinary, and he isn't a ninja who only relies on magnet release. However, he doesn't care about this, on the contrary, he is a little excited. Hyojin didn't answer. He tilted his head slightly, turned around, and swept his leg. Hiruho's body sank, and the scarlet Sharingan in his eye sockets rotated rapidly, avoiding Hyojin's leg sweep, and immediately used steel release to strengthen his right arm, stabbing straight at Hyojin's side. At this time, Hyojin's leg sweep was already finished, and he was in midair, with almost no leverage, so Hiruho's face showed a smile of success. "Hey, competing with my swift release in speed? Competing with my Sharingan in insight? Stupid guy." Hiruho sneered in his heart. He is confident that no one can suppress him in speed except for Nagato, who has swift release, and no one can suppress him in insight. At the same time, he is enjoying the sense of accomplishment of killing an expert. He even feels that if this member of Amatsukami in front of him is a little stronger, it might be more interesting. However, the smile on Hiroko's face quickly froze as Suijin adjusted his body in a strange posture, not only avoiding Hiroko's thrusting arm, but also turning around and kicking Hiroko's face fiercely. Bang! Another muffled thud rang out, and Hiroko was sent flying through the air, smashing a large hole into a house on the side of the street. Hiruho, who had steel release to protect himself, quickly jumped out. At this time, his face no longer had the previous calmness, but a little more exasperated. "Damn it, your action just now!" Halfway through his words, Hiruho shut his mouth. For some reason, he vaguely had a feeling that the other party understood the Sharingan very well, and even knew how to deceive the Sharingan's insight. But this is obviously impossible, unless the other party is also a Jutsu Kekai ninja. Hyojin did not answer. He just slightly moved his neck. From the beginning of the battle, Kuroda didn't provoke Hiroko anymore because his enemy was far more than just Hiroko in front of him. He must be fully focused and always be on guard against Nagato or Obito's sneak attack. Seeing that the box of bliss has been moved out of his field of vision by the Konoha ninjas, Hiroko showed a fierce expression on his face. "Well, I'm going to get serious." Whoosh! After saying that, Hiruho pounced straight at Hyojin. Hiruho's full strength burst out, and his speed was simply astonishing. Even if it was just a normal attack, it caused a wave of air, and there was even a faint sound of explosion. Hyojin's expression turned serious, and he no longer held back. He rushed forward to meet Hiruho. Boom! 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 In an instant, the battle between the two left dozens of afterimages. It was obviously a one-on-one duel, but it was as fast as a dozen people fighting each other. The sound of explosions, air waves, the cracking of the ground, and the roar of collapsing brick walls erupted at the same time. Are they monsters? One by one, the Mai ninjas were dumbfounded. Even Jiraiya and Tsunade were surprised. The strength of Hiruho and Hyojin's taijutsu was completely beyond their expectations. Their speed was so fast, and their moves were so sharp that they were dazzled. Senshi Fukasaku, who jumped on top of Jiraiya's head, said with a sigh, "This member of Amatsukumi's taijutsu is actually comparable to the rapid release. It's simply incredible." Jiraiya nodded. "I'm afraid that in the entire village, only that kid from the Uchiha family can have such speed." Tsunade said with a gloomy face, "Unless it's a forbidden technique like the 8 inner gates, otherwise, this kind of taijutsu strength should be the peak of the ninja world." Although very reluctant, Tsunade has to admit that no one in the current Mai can match the level of taijutsu in terms of taijutsu alone. Listening to the comments of the Mai Sanins Jiraiya and Tsunade, the Mai ninjas felt their hearts palpitate. Fortunately, this member of Amatsukumi blocked Hiruho's attack. Otherwise, a bloody battle would have been inevitable, and it's hard to say how many of his companions would have survived. Boom! 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 In the dark night, the two of them moved like ghosts. Their speed was so fast that it seemed as if they were constantly flickering. No matter what they hit along the way, houses, courtyard walls, street lamps, etc., everything was destroyed with a single touch. In the blink of an eye, the entire street was almost destroyed. Without the Sharingan in his left eye, Kakashi's insight has dropped by a level, so he could only ask Jiraiya next to him, "Jiraiya-sama, who do you think will win?" Jiraiya shook his head and said, "It's hard to say at the moment." Tsunade analyzed. Hiruho not only has the rapid release, but he also has the steel release to protect his body. Coupled with the Sharingan's insight, if the stalemate continues, he may have the upper hand. Red, who was staring at the battlefield, immediately said, "Wind Chime will not lose." In an instant, the eyes of all the Mai ninjas gathered on Red. Kakashi asked directly, "Wind Chime? Did you say that the member of Amatsukumi is called Wind Chime? Is it a name or a code name? How did you know?" Realizing that she had let the cat out of the bag, Red had to explain, "When I was held hostage by Orochimaru, It was because of him that I was able to escape. I heard Orochimaru call him that at that time. It should be a code name. Tsunade said, Wind Chime? It seems like he should be the representative of the wind attribute of Amatsukami. Mai's intelligence team had analyzed Amatsukami, and from the known code names Yama, Suijin, and Homasubi, they came to the conclusion that every member of Amatsukami represented a chakra attribute. The leader, Yama, obviously represented the Yin attribute. Suijin, who had the ice release bloodline limit, represented the water attribute. Homasubi, who had the Manjikyu Sharingan, undoubtedly represented the fire attribute, and this wind chime obviously represented the wind attribute. Because of this speculation, the village believed that there should be 7 official members of Amatsukami. In addition to the 4 known members, there might be another 3 who represented the Yang attribute, Earth attribute, and Thunder attribute. Chapter 479. Brother, get up and have breakfast. Under the bright sunshine, Itachi slowly opened his eyes. In his field of vision was his cute younger brother's childish face. Itachi subconsciously flicked Sasuke's forehead and said with a smile, It's Sasuke. Sasuke pouted and said, Brother is really a lazy guy. Following Sasuke all the way to the dining room, Itachi found that his father, who was always serious, was now joking with his mother, and his mother was preparing breakfast with a smile on her face. Soon, his mother put the fragrant breakfast on the table. After sitting side by side with his younger brother Sasuke, Itachi said casually, I'm going to eat. Eating the fragrant breakfast and listening to his family's chat, Itachi's mood became better. This kind of ordinary and natural daily life was the life he had been looking forward to the most. At this time, his father Fuyue suddenly asked, Itachi, do you still remember what day it is today? Itachi was stunned and fell into a short trance. Sasuke shouted, I know, today is the day when the 5th generation leader succeeds the position of Naruto. Fuyue crossed his arms in front of his chest and said seriously, the 5th generation values our Uchiha clan very much. This time, our whole family must attend his succession ceremony. Itachi quickly nodded and said, Yes. Not long after breakfast, the family changed into regular clothes and went out. However, as soon as they left the mansion, Itachi met Jishue in the clansland, so he went forward and greeted him. Brother Jishue, are you also going to attend the 5th generation succession ceremony? Jishue smiled brightly and said, The 5th generation finally becomes Naruto today. How can I be absent on such a day? Holding Sasuke's hand, Itachi said, Then let's go together. Jishue smiled and said, Okay. When Itachi's family walked out of the clan's land, a large group of Uchiha clansmen who were going to attend the 5th generation succession ceremony were already following behind. The streets of Mai were also very lively at this moment. Because of the 5th generation succession ceremony, the shops along the street were holding celebration activities. The villagers poured into the streets from all directions, forming a sea of people, slowly rushing in the direction of the Naruto building. In the crowd, Itachi and Jishue walked slowly while chatting. The bright sunshine, the warm breeze, and Sasuke, who was clamoring on the street to buy tricolor meatballs, all of these made Itachi feel extremely comfortable. When they came to the square in front of the Naruto building, everyone finally saw the 5th generation leader. He stood quietly on the roof of the Naruto building, accepting the villagers' cheers and congratulations. Jishue looked up at the roof of the Naruto building and said with a smile, Senior has finally become Naruto. Itachi nodded with a smile and said, Yes, finally there is a Naruto who can understand our Uchiha clan and can control our Uchiha clan. Fuyue, who had a serious face, showed a rare smile and said, Itachi, the 5th generation leader told me in private that he is very optimistic that you will succeed him as the next Naruto. Sasuke suddenly looked surprised and said, Brother can become Naruto? Itachi shook his head shyly and said, "Father, you must be joking. I am still far from it." Glancing at Itachi, Fuyue said, "Good luck. The 5th generation leader told me that the Mai clan should have a Uchiha Naruto. This is what our Uchiha clan deserves." Looking at the encouraging and expectant eyes of his father, mother, brother, Jishui and others, Itachi scratched his head and asked, "Can I do it?" At this time, the ceremony officially began. The 3 generations handed over the bamboo hat representing the position of Naruto to the 5th generation leader, and the 5th generation leader wore the bamboo hat on his head in front of the whole village. In an instant, the cheers went straight to the sky. Shouts, applause, and cheers were intertwined, making the whole village like a sea of joy. The 5th generation is the hero who saved the village. The 5th generation destroyed the Akatsuki organization and maintained the peace of the ninja world. The 5th generation is the strongest ninja in the world. Listening to the discussions and cheers of the villagers, Itachi and Jishui looked at each other, and immediately, the corners of their mouths curled up, and each showed a smile that only the other could understand. After the ceremony, Itachi and Jishui were summoned to Naruto's office. Because there were no outsiders, Itachi took off the bamboo hat on his head and revealed the face under it. It turned out that the 5th generation leader who succeeded Naruto was none other than Hyojin. Hyojin smiled and said, "The Akatsuki organization has been destroyed, and it is time for our Amatsukami to disappear." Jishui nodded and said, "Well, Amatsukami has completed its mission." Itachi also agreed. Everything in the shinobi world is returning to the right track. Hyojin patted Jishui and Itachi on the shoulder and said, "I hereby announce the dissolution of Amatsukami." For some reason, Itachi frowned and asked, "Senpai, don't we need to inform the other members?" Hyojin smiled and said, "The other members? There are only 3 of us in Amatsukami." "Only 3 of us?" Itachi was stunned. He wanted to say the names of the other members, but when the words came to his mouth, he could not remember who else was in Amatsukami. Jishui also covered her head, and her eyes were out of focus. "There are only 3 of us in Amatsukami?" After leaving Naruto's office, Itachi said to Jishui, "I don't know why, but I feel like I've forgotten something important." Jishui said, "I feel the same way. I feel like something is wrong." Itachi stopped and said, "Brother Jishui, when did you feel this way?" Jishui recalled and answered, "I think it was when Adachi disbanded. Since then, I have felt a little empty in my heart." Itachi sensed something and asked, "Brother Jishui, are there really only 3 of us in Amatsukami? Why do you ask? Didn't the 5th generation hermit say that there are only the 3 of us?" Shursui paused and suddenly covered his eyes and murmured, "That's not right. I've clearly used other deity once, but why can't I remember where I've used it?" Itachi also said, "I remember there should be someone else in Amatsukami. She was the one who trained and tested me, and in the end, I became a member of Amatsukami. I don't know why, but I just can't remember her. She must exist." The 2 of them looked at each other in a daze, and then they were shocked and said at the same time, "We've fallen into an illusion." At that moment, Sasuke ran over. He shook Itachi's hand and said coquettishly, "Brother, you promised me that you would accompany me to buy the best tricolor meatballs." Not far away, his parents were also waving at Itachi. "Itachi, it's time to go home." Looking at his coquettish brother and listening to his parents calling him, Itachi smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Jishui, I think we found the sword of 10 punches." Chapter 480. Jishui looked around with a complicated expression, looking at the peaceful and prosperous Mai village in front of him, looking at the Uchiha people and other villagers without any barriers. He sighed with emotion. "Although I was fooled by the Tokugan sword, such a village, such a life is really beautiful. Yes, it's a beautiful world." After a pause, Itachi said in a deep voice, Unfortunately, it's fake. Jishui smiled. With Senpai here, we will definitely be able to create all of this in reality. Definitely. After saying that, the black eyes in Jishui's eye sockets suddenly turned scarlet, and the three Magatama rotated rapidly and quickly connected together, changing into the shape of a four-edged shuriken. At this time, the surrounding scenery became hazy. It was as if a beautiful canvas was poured with a big ladle of water, the lines on the canvas appeared distorted, and the colors were mixed with each other, intertwined into a ball. Not long after, the original real and lively village, close relatives, familiar friends, and everything else turned into nothingness, and there was a red chaos all around. Itachi looked around and said, "This should be the real interior scene of the Tenseigan sword." Jishui, who was observing the surroundings with the Manjikyu Sharingan, suddenly wrinkled his nose. "Hey, what is this smell? It smells so good, it seems to be the smell of wine?" Itachi, who felt a little confused, quickly exclaimed, "Not good. If we can't find the way out before we get drunk, we may fall into the illusion again." Jishui covered his mouth and nose and frowned. "My Manjikyu can't see anything." At this time, Itachi also opened his Manjikyu Sharingan, and soon, a brilliance flashed in his left eye, and he was stunned for a moment and said, "I found the exit." As soon as his voice fell, Itachi and Jishui felt that the world was turned upside down, as if they had fallen into the abyss. After a long time, the two of them slowly recovered. Itachi stood up and shook his head, and found that he and Jishui had returned to the previous tomb. Crack! Suddenly, a crack appeared on the stone gourd that sucked them in. Then, the crack grew bigger and bigger. In the blink of an eye, the crack covered the entire stone gourd. Walala, with a crisp sound, the stone gourd sculpture shattered into countless pieces and scattered in the tomb chamber. Itachi covered his left eye and muttered, "So Tsukuyomi is the key to activating Sword of 10 Punches." The pupil technique contained in Itachi's left Manjikyu Sharingan is none other than Tsukuyomi, so as soon as he opened the Manjikyu Sharingan, he grasped the method to control the sword jutsu, and as a result, he was able to escape from the illusory space of the sword jutsu with Jishui. Jishui crawled up from the ground and exclaimed, "Oh no, something just crawled into my body." Itachi asked curiously, "What is it?" Jishui touched her body and said in an uncertain tone, "It seems to be a mirror or something. I didn't see it clearly just now." As soon as she finished speaking, Jishui froze for a moment and turned to look at Itachi. Immediately, the two of them blurted out at the same time, "Yata no Kagami." Although their main purpose this time was to find the sword jutsu, they also knew very well that the Yata no Kagami and the sword jutsu should be together. Once they found the sword jutsu, it meant that they had found the Yata no Kagami. Itachi smiled. "Brother Jishui, you got the Yata no Kagami, and I got the sword jutsu." Jishui nodded and looked at the coffin standing quietly in the middle of the tomb chamber. She said, "This should be a test. Only those who can pass the test can get these two artifacts." Itachi nodded and said, "Yes, and these two artifacts are directly integrated with our spirit bodies. Unless our spirit bodies are annihilated, there is no way to take them off. Perhaps it is for this reason that the ancestor was unable to pass these two artifacts to other clansmen." Originally, Jishui and Itachi were still a little puzzled. It was obviously such a powerful artifact. Why didn't the ancestor of Uchiha pass it on to his descendants, but brought it into the tomb? Now that they had obtained the artifacts, they understood the special nature of these two artifacts. Not everyone could control these two artifacts. Once they were recognized by the artifacts, the spirit body would be integrated with the artifact and become one. Only when the master's spirit body was annihilated would the artifact be separated. The ancestor of Uchiha, who owned these two artifacts, obviously understood this, so he set up this test before his death and left many stone tablets everywhere so that qualified clansmen could come and accept the test of the artifacts. But judging from the results, these two artifacts had disappeared for hundreds of years. It could be seen that the subsequent Uchiha clansmen had not been able to pass the test of the artifact. And once the test failed, the Uchiha clansmen who accepted the test would be completely immersed in the illusory world of Tenseigan's sword. Not only would they not get the artifact, but they would also lose their lives. So over time, fewer and fewer clansmen dared to accept the test of the artifact. After all, no matter how good the artifact was, it was not as important as their own lives. As a result, fewer and fewer people knew the whereabouts of the artifact, and the clues of Tenseigan's sword were gradually cut off. Jishui stood up and said with emotion, "If you want to control Tenseigan's sword, not only do you need the Manjikyu Sharingan, it seems that you also need to have the pupil technique Tsukuyomi. Itachi, if it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would never be able to escape Tenseigan's sword." It was extremely rare for a clansman to be able to awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan in the Uchiha clan, not to mention awakening the pupil technique Tsukuyomi. This kind of coincidence might only happen once in hundreds of years, and Itachi was the embodiment of the coincidence after hundreds of years. Rumble, suddenly, Itachi's stomach made a sound. Rumble, then, Jishui's stomach also made a sound. "I'm so hungry," the two of them said in unison. After taking out the soldier ration pill and chewing one each, Jishui said, "I don't know how long it has been since we were sucked into Tenseigan's sword. Senpai received the news, but couldn't find us. He must be very anxious." Itachi replied, "Yes, we have to hurry back to the village as soon as possible." At this time, a ninja crow flew into the tomb. "It's a messenger crow sent by Senpai." Seeing this, Jishui quickly got up and went forward to check the message on the ninja crow's leg. Caw-caw. Before Jishui untied the leg of the first ninja crow, a crow's cry came, and immediately, another ninja crow flew into the tomb. Then, more and more ninja crows flew in one after another, landing on the coffin in the tomb chamber. The originally quiet tomb chamber was filled with the cawing of crows. Looking at the dozens of messenger crows, Jishui and Itachi looked at each other and said, "Something happened to the village?" Chapter 481. My Village. Boom! In the midst of the explosion, Hyojin's fist landed on Hiriko's chest. The force of the punch was so great that even Hiriko, who had been strengthened by the steel release, couldn't help but cry out in pain. Boom! 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 Hiriko, who was sent flying, smashed 7 or 8 buildings in a row, accompanied by splashing gravel and smoke, and finally hit the outer wall of my village, smashing a big hole in the solid wall. Puff! As soon as Hiriko was sent flying, Hyojin coughed up a big mouthful of blood. Because he was wearing a mask, the blood didn't splatter out, but flowed along the edge of the mask, along his chin, and dripped onto his chest. Even if he didn't use the bone vein, his Type A wind-release clone body would vomit blood from time to time, so he wasn't too surprised. After staggering a few steps and stabilizing his body, Hyojin snorted lightly. "TSK, this bastard can actually withstand my Type A wind-release clone body's physical attack." Really, although he had tried to overestimate Hiriko's strength, but after the real fight, Hyojin found that Hiriko's strength was even higher than what he had expected. Whether it was swift release or steel release, it was actually nothing. What really gave Hyojin a headache was that Hiriko was very proficient in using the Sharingan, and the stronger the user, the more significant the effect of the Sharingan. It can be said that because of the existence of the Sharingan, Hiriko's swift release and steel release have been greatly improved, and the Sharingan has raised Hiriko's strength to a whole new level. At this time, Hiriko's figure flashed, and he jumped out of the big hole, panting heavily while muttering angrily, "Damn it, you can actually hurt me, how is this possible? This is impossible." At this moment, the Akatsuki red cloud suit on Hiriko's body has long been torn, leaving only a few pieces of black cloth hanging on his body, revealing his bandaged body. Moreover, His right arm was twisted at a 90-degree angle, and his chest, where Hyojin had just hit, had completely caved in. In contrast, Kuroto on the opposite side is slightly more decent. At this time, the black cloak of Amatsukami that Kuroto was wearing was also damaged in many places, the sleeve of his left arm was long gone, and there was a long wound on the right side of his rib. In the shadows in the distance, White Zetsu, who was hiding in the rubble, smacked his lips and said, "I didn't expect this guy from Amatsukami to be so strong, to be able to last so long against Hirako." Black Zetsu immediately corrected, "Idiot, he was the one who suppressed Hirako." White Zetsu was taken aback for a moment, then asked in disbelief, "Hirako will lose?" Akatsuki's internal evaluation of Hirako's strength, if not for the fact that Hirako often suffers from the Onigami's backlash, his strength has already surpassed the 5 Kage, and this gap will only become more and more obvious as time passes. In other words, Hirako has a lot of room for growth, and his current strength has already surpassed the 5 Kage, making him one of the strongest people in the shinobi world, and also the trump card in Nagato's hand. Looking at Hyojin from afar, Black Zetsu said, "I can't come to a conclusion now. That guy from Amatsukami obviously didn't suffer any serious injuries, but he suddenly vomited blood. It can be seen that the battle just now was a great burden to him. I suspect that he used some forbidden technique that will harm his body, or there is something wrong with his body." White Zetsu asked, "Then what should we do?" Black Zetsu said in a deep voice, "Go and inform Nagato. It seems that Hirako alone won't be able to complete the task of retrieving the box of bliss and capturing the members of Amatsukami." After saying that, with a rustling sound, it shrank into the ground and disappeared without a trace on the battlefield. Hirako roared angrily, you are dead tonight, no one can save you." Hyojin, who was also panting a little, smiled and said, "If you can do it, you can try. Do you think this is my full strength?" With a sneer, Hirako said with a hideous expression, "You can't even imagine my strength." Saying so, a number of gelatinous ghost sprouts emerged from Hirako's body. These ghost sprouts stretched out from the gaps between the bandages and wrapped around Hirako's deformed right arm, instantly restoring it to its original state. At the same time, under the skin of his chest, there was a burst of squirming, and soon the sunken area bulged again. Looking at Hirako's seriously injured body completely recovered in the blink of an eye, Tsunade said with a solemn expression, "This is definitely not a medical ninjutsu, this should be the human body transformation technique that he is good at." Jiraiya's face was filled with bitterness. Among them, there is regret that his childhood friend has become a monster that is neither human nor ghost, and there is also worry about Mai's fate. Hirako's strength is already very strong, it is very difficult to hurt him, and now that he has shown such a terrifying recovery ability, Jiraiya doesn't even know how to defeat him. Maybe I can try using genjutsu? But he also has the nether release, his body can absorb any form of chakra, and his resistance to genjutsu is extremely high, unless I use the immortal jutsu chakra to cast genjutsu. After thinking about it, Jiraiya secretly made a plan and winked at the two-toed masters beside him. Red, who has always believed that Kazekime will win, is also a little anxious after seeing Hirako's exaggerated recovery ability. As for Kakashi, who has been secretly arranging the Hataru Thunder God Jutsu, he was watching the battlefield with full concentration, looking for an opportunity to intervene. Although it is difficult to distinguish between Amatsukami's friend and foe, solving the Akatsuki's threat is obviously the top priority. On the battlefield, Hirako, who has recovered from all his injuries, raised his hands and quickly made a hand seal. Mist release, Mist Ghost Dragon. Kacha with the ninjutsu activated, the wind and clouds in the sky instantly surged, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Standing on a broken wall, Hirako, who has completed the ninjutsu, put his hands on his waist and said with a playful look on his face, Look carefully, this is my full strength, next enjoy your death. From time to time, lightning flashed in the sky, echoing with the electric light on his body, illuminating his figure, making him look like a demon born from lightning. Tsunade frowned. This is Cloud Village's mist release. Everyone must be careful. Once you are hit, even if it is just a little bit, your life will be in danger. Jiraiya, who is trying to re-enter the sage mode, looked at the hellish scene in front of him and said, I hope I can make it in time. Chapter 482. Watching Hyojin pull out a bone blade from his palm, Hirako sneered. Corpse bone vein? Because of the Mist Squad's participation, Hirako is no stranger to the Kaguya clan's corpse bone vein. In private, he even competed with the entire Mist Squad once, although neither side used their full strength in that contest. But on the battlefield, it was Hirako who suppressed the entire Mist Squad with his own strength, so he doesn't think much of the Mist Clan's corpse bone vein and red eye. Hirako raised his right hand and spread his fingers slightly. In an instant, a bolt of lightning flashed in the black clouds in the sky and fell straight into his palm. The violent lightning was like a docile spirit in his palm. Holding the dazzling lightning in his hand, Hirako smiled and said, If your trump card is only the corpse bone vein, I will be very disappointed. Hyojin said lightly, I hope you won't regret it later. Swish, after saying that, Hyojin's figure flashed and disappeared. The corner of Hirako's mouth rose. You can also be faster than lightning? As he said, he pressed the lightning in his palm towards the ground. Zizi, in a split second, the highly concentrated thunder and lightning spread across the ground like a curtain of light. The electric currents were like jumping elves, pouncing in all directions. Looking at the incoming lightning, Tsunade shouted, Everyone, get out of the way! Under Tsunade's warning, the my ninjas on the edge of the battlefield suddenly scattered like birds and beasts. In the battlefield, Hirako's hands were constantly waving, controlling the lightning in the thunderclouds above his head. At this moment, he is like a conductor, the raging lightning is like a musical note under his command. Wherever his finger points, the lightning will strike. In the midst of the interweaving lightning, Kuroto's figure was erratic, like a ghost, unbelievably fast. The fight between the two strong people caused the my ninjas on the edge of the battlefield to complain incessantly. Although they have been warned by Tsunade, the speed of ordinary ninjas is not as fast as the lightning. Ah! In the blink of an eye, wailing sounds rang out one after another. Many my shinobi were hit by Hirako's mist release, and in an instant, their whole body was turned into a pile of charcoal, many of which were my Zumbu. Chaotic lion hair technique. Jiraiya, who was putting his hands together and preparing to enter the sage mode again, hurriedly cast a Muji ninjutsu. With a shake of his head, his white hair instantly swelled, protecting several my ninjas around him, blocking the lightning attack. On the other side, Tsunade shouted and punched the ground. Boom! With a roar and tremor, the ground that was hit by Tsunade's fist turned over, blocking the lightning for Tsunade and several my ninjas around her. On the side of Hyojin's Umbu Squad 7, Hyojin's shadow clone had already ordered his subordinates to dodge, but because Red was too focused on observing the battle situation on the battlefield, she was a little late, so when the other 3 members of Squad 7 had retreated far away, she was still in the same place. Swish, just at the moment when the lightning was about to sweep Red's body, Kakashi used the Flying Thunder God technique to land beside her, and immediately disappeared together with her. Immediately, Kakashi and the rest of Hyojin's Squad 7 hid in a relatively intact building in the distance. After putting Red down, Kakashi asked Hyojin with a serious face, Kuroto, how is the situation? Because the distance was too far, and the light was flickering, it was difficult for Kakashi, who had lost his Sharingan, to observe the situation on the battlefield. Hyojin's shadow clone activated Byakugan, and immediately shook his head. There is lightning everywhere on the battlefield, there is no way to observe it all, but don't worry too much, that member of Amatsukami should not lose. Red turned her head and looked at Hyojin's shadow clone suspiciously. Hyojin's shadow clone asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Red said, "Kuroto, I always feel that there is something wrong with you tonight. With your conceit, how can you be so calm in the face of such a strong master?" Hyojin's shadow clone was speechless. "When did I give you the impression that I am conceited?" On the side, Gale wiped the cold sweat on his head. "Except for Jiraiya-sama and Tsunade-sama, no one can intervene in a battle of this level. Although Captain is conceited, he is not stupid." Shien also echoed, "Yeah." Hyojin's shadow clone was even more speechless. "Hey, you idiots, don't talk nonsense, I am confident, not conceited." At this time, Red moved closer to Hyojin's ear and whispered, "Tell me honestly, do you know Kamikaze?" From the moment he saw the Byakugan in the Wind-type A clone's eye sockets, Red has always believed that Kamikaze of Amatsukami is a member of the Hyuga clan, and most likely a member of the noble Hyuga clan. Hyojin's shadow clone shook his head. "I don't know what you are talking about." The reason why Hyojin's shadow clone has been slacking off tonight is not because he ignored this point, but because Hyojin's soul body has been invested in the Wind-type A clone, so he can't continue to supply the Tenseigan chakra to the shadow clone, so this shadow clone can't participate in high-intensity battles. Otherwise, it is very likely that the shadow clone will accidentally dissipate due to exhaustion of chakra. On the battlefield, in just a few flashes, Hyojin arrived in front of Hirako. "You?" Seeing Hyojin pass through the layers of lightning net, Hirako's face showed a look of disbelief. He couldn't imagine what kind of speed and insight was needed to achieve this. Under the mask, Hyojin's expression was cold, and without the slightest hesitation, he slashed down with the bone blade in his hand. Hirako was half a beat too slow in his reaction. Although he has the swift release, he still couldn't avoid Hyojin's fierce attack, so he could only barely raise his right arm to protect his face. Clang! The sharp bone blade cut into Hirako's tanned right arm that was strengthened by the steel release, making a harsh sound. "You want to break through my steel release with just a mere bone blade?" The corner of Hirako's mouth couldn't help but rise. He couldn't be more familiar with this sound. Almost every time a sharp blade slashed his body, it would make such a sound. He had heard this sound countless times. However, his smile soon froze, and the scene reflected in the scarlet eye of the Sharingan was that his right arm that was strengthened by the steel release was cut off by the bone blade at the elbow. This? In shock, Hirako subconsciously waved his left hand at Hyojin. In an instant, countless lightning bolts surged towards Hyojin. However, Hyojin didn't dodge. Instead, he stretched out his right hand and caught the incoming lightning bolt. Then, with a squeeze, the lightning bolts were extinguished, leaving only a wisp of green smoke. Chapter 483. The first few days of May seem to have the effect of doubling the monthly votes, so I implore everyone to continue to support me and give me the guaranteed monthly votes for May. May 1st is actually my birthday, but everyone can rest assured that I won't go out and have fun. If there are no accidents, there will be an extra chapter on the 1st, 3 chapters guaranteed. Finally, thank you again for your support this month. The Naruto World in the Eyes of Reincarnation, currently typing, please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 484. Looking at the distant thunder and lightning in the night sky, Nagato's indifferent face had a dignified expression. Konan, who was standing on the side, also frowned. Her delicate face was full of doubt. Who forced Hirako to this point? Did other members of Amatsukami appear? The destructive power of mist release is one of the best among all Kekii Genkai. Because of this, mist release chakra consumes a lot of energy, Even Hirako won't easily use mist release unless it's a critical moment. Soon, Zetsu poked his head out of the ground and reported to Nagato on the cliff. Obsidian reported, "That guy from Amatsukami is unexpectedly difficult to deal with. I'm afraid that Hirako won't be able to complete the mission." Obsidian was a little puzzled. Doesn't Hirako have nether release? How can he not be able to defeat that magnet release ninja from Amatsukami? Nether release is almost fatal to ninjutsu ninjas. As long as it's not a powerful Kekkai Genkai like the 3 generations Tsuchikage, ordinary ninjutsu, even some Kekkai Genkai, can't resist the direct effect of nether release on chakra. Zetsu curled his lips and said, "That magnet release ninja from Amatsukami is ridiculously strong. He was able to suppress Hirako one-on-one." Konan sighed. "No wonder Amatsukami sent him first. It seems that he is not an abandoned child of Amatsukami, but a trump card of Amatsukami." Zetsu asked, "What should we do now?" Nagato took a step forward and walked to the edge of the cliff, and said in a flat tone, "No matter who it is, no one can stop me from punishing Mai. I will send 6 paths of pain to completely raze Mai to the ground." After saying that, Nagato turned his head and looked at Obsidian. "You also go, kill that member of Amatsukami, and let Mortal Path extract his soul. This time I will uproot Amatsukami." The masked man nodded and disappeared into the twisting vortex in a flash. Zetsu also wriggled his body and quickly shrank into the ground. "My village." Staring at Hyojin's right hand that caught the lightning with his bare hand, Hirako's expression fluctuated. "This is periosteum?" Amidst the wisps of green smoke, Hirako noticed the white periosteum on Hyojin's right hand that was slowly retracting under his skin. Damn it, his corpse bone vein is completely different from the lotus. After witnessing the sharpness of Hyojin's bone blade, as well as the toughness of his bone membrane, Hirako immediately realized that Hyojin's bone vein was on a completely different level from the Mist Squad's bone vein. With this thought in mind, Hiruhu's figure flashed, and he suddenly retreated. This was the first time he felt a sense of danger since the start of the battle. He took the initiative to distance himself from the enemy. His arm that was cut off by Hyojin's bone blade was tied up by Ghost Sprout's gel and dragged on the ground, retreating with him. Puff, at this time, Hyojin coughed up another mouthful of blood, but he didn't care. His figure only paused for a moment, then immediately rushed forward. He will never give Hirako a chance to breathe. Cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots is his style. At this time, he was holding a bone blade in each hand, and a sharp bone spike protruded from his elbow. His whole body was like a wisp of wind, chasing after Hirako, who was shrouded in lightning. From time to time, he would slash his blade and cut a part of Hirako's body into pieces. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! The flustered and exasperated Hirako gradually felt fear from the bottom of his heart. His invincible steel release couldn't block the opponent's bone blade at all. The bone blade in the opponent's hand was so sharp that it was terrifying. Or rather, the bone blade had already surpassed the level of sharpness. It seemed that there was something hidden in it that made his steel release completely unable to block it. Looking at the battle between Hyojin and Hirako, Jiraiya and Tsunade, who were not far away, were dumbfounded. Jiraiya said with a sigh, "So it turns out that one can reach this level just by relying on physical skills." Each of Hyojin's moves and styles seemed to have no fixed pattern. They looked natural and casual, but each of them was thrilling. Hirako's physical skills had already reached the peak, but in the face of Hyojin's increasingly fierce offensive, he was at a slight disadvantage and was completely suppressed. Many parts of his body, such as his arms, shoulders, and so on, have been cut into pieces. If it weren't for the Ghost Sprout's gelatinous substance forcefully holding them together, Hirako's body would have already fallen apart. But even so, Hirako wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. However, Tsunade's eyes were solemn as she said, Did you notice that Kamikaze's taijutsu style of Amatsukami has many traces of Konoha's taijutsu, Uchiha's taijutsu, Hyuga's taijutsu, and even some Konoha's taijutsu? Boom. 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 Well, without waiting for Jiraiya to answer, a loud rumbling sound came from all around the village. Immediately afterward, a series of beast howls came one after another. Jiraiya hurriedly jumped onto the ruins of a tall building and looked around. He found that many huge summoning beasts had invaded the village, and these summoning beasts all had the symbolic black stick of Nagato's summoning beast on their bodies. Jiraiya said bitterly and helplessly. Nagato finally made his move. Naruto's office. Naruto-sama, a suspicious person with Rinnegan has appeared in the Eastern District. Naruto-sama, a suspicious person with Rinnegan has also appeared in the Western District. Naruto-sama, the same thing happened in the Southern District. One after another, Mayumbu entered the office and reported the latest news to Three Generations. Three Generations calmly asked, "Describe the appearance of the suspicious person." The Umbu members immediately described the appearance of the suspicious people in each area to the Hokage-sama in detail. After listening to the description of the Umbu, Three Generations couldn't help but think, all of them have yellow hair, it seems that these should be human puppets controlled by Nagato. Although the last raid on the Hidden Rain Village failed to harm the Akatsuki organization, they managed to collect a lot of information about the organization. For example, the 6 Paths of Pain with Rinnegan is just a puppet controlled by Akatsuki's leader, Nagato. This crucial information was collected during the last raid. After pondering for a moment, Three Generations ordered the Shadow Guard captain next to him, "Inform the 4 shadows, prepare to attack at any time." Although Nagato hasn't appeared in person yet, the appearance of the 6 Paths of Pain means that he has already made his move, and may arrive at any time. On the battlefield, listening to the roars of summoning beasts around him, and feeling the violent tremors on the ground, Hyojin realized that Nagato might have already made his move, so he slightly slowed down his attack on Hiriko and secretly raised his guard. At this moment, a distortion appeared behind Hyojin without warning and began to separate him from time and space. Chapter 485. Kamiri? Kuroda was startled by the familiar feeling of stripping from his back. Even if he was mentally prepared, even if he was already secretly on guard, when the time came, no matter how experienced he was in battle, he still couldn't help but feel a little nervous in his heart. In just a moment, he found several suspicious sources of chakra in his field of vision. But at this time, he didn't have the time to identify which source of chakra was Obsidian's real hiding place. He only had a short 2 or 3 seconds to break free. If he couldn't get rid of Obsidian's Kamui in these precious 2 or 3 seconds, the consequences would be self-evident. The distortion of his body became more and more serious, and the numbness of being stripped of time and space almost filled Hyojin's body, making him unable to control his body freely. This feeling was even stronger than when he was in the Mist's collection. Obviously, after retrieving his left eye, Obsidian's pupil power became stronger. Should I give up this clone body? Countless thoughts in his mind scattered in an instant, and then instantly gathered back. No, never. Hyojin's expression changed. He suppressed the panic and uneasiness in his heart, emptying all his thoughts, leaving only a strong fighting spirit in his heart. Dance of the Early Fern. Boom, boom, boom. Accompanied by the tremors of the earth, Hyojin unreservedly activated the strongest secret technique of bone vein. In an instant, one thick bone spear after another rose from the ground. At the same time, a bone spear directly penetrated Hyojin's body, wrapping Hyojin's body that was completely distorted and was about to be stripped out of time and space. The moment his body merged with the bone spear, Hyojin immediately activated the ability of bone vein and changed his position in the bone spear. Swoosh! At this time, Kamui was completed. A huge circular hole suddenly appeared on the originally tough and thick bone spear, and this circular hole was the place where Hyojin was just a moment ago. The appearance of the huge circular hole instantly snapped the bone spear in half. Suijin's incomparably tough bone spear didn't even have the slightest room to resist the attack of the space-time ninjutsu Kamui. Obsidian, who was hiding in the dark and witnessed all this, frowned. From the moment Hyojin activated Dance of the Early Fern, he felt that something was wrong. At the same time, he was very puzzled. How could Hyojin's Dance of the Early Fern be launched so quickly? Almost in the blink of an eye, a large white bone forest was erected. If I knew this, I would have been closer. Obito didn't expect that Suijin would use this method to escape the lock of his Kamui, which caught him off guard, and at the same time, he also felt a little regretful. After all, he only had one chance to sneak attack Suijin. After obtaining Kamui, although he can use Kamui from a long distance, but the farther the distance from the target, the slower the activation of Kamui will be. When he launched the sneak attack just now, he hid in a ruin about 300 meters away from Hyojin, so from the time he launched Kamui to the time it was completed, it took at least 4 to 5 seconds. 4 to 5 seconds is actually just a few breaths of time, and it was a sudden attack without any warning. An average ninja would need 1 or 2 seconds to react, so it is more than enough to deal with ordinary ninjas, but against a member of Amatsukami, this time is slightly long. The bone forest that was constantly rising from the ground almost scared everyone on the scene. One after another, sharp bone spears suddenly emerged from the ground, and ordinary people didn't even have the time to dodge. Hirako, who had Hakushin, was almost directly pierced by the bone spears, and he only managed to avoid them by a hair's breadth. The situation on the Mai side was even more chaotic. However, to the surprise of the Mai ninjas, these bone spears seemed to have a mind of their own and actively avoided them, causing a large group of people to be scared in vain. After calming down, everyone looked at each other. From the time Hyojin was attacked by Kamui to the time he launched Dance of the Early Fern and escaped with the help of the bone forest, the whole process only took a few seconds, so except for Hirako, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and a few others, most of the Mai ninjas had a blank expression on their faces, completely unaware of what happened. At this time, Jiraiya, who has once again entered Sage Mode, shouted loudly, "A new enemy has appeared, it's the guy from Akatsuki that can use space-time ninjutsu, everyone be careful." In Sage Mode, Jiraiya can perceive Chakra's location without the need for vision, so although he can't accurately find Obsidian's location due to the distance, but he knows that Obsidian has already appeared on the battlefield. After receiving Jiraiya's warning, all the Mai ninjas, including Tsunade, quietly used the shadow clone technique to hide their real bodies. In the last raid on the Rain Village, the village also collected a lot of information about Obsidian, although they haven't found a way to completely restrain Obsidian's Kamui. But some methods to confuse and resist Kamui have already been passed on to the Umbu and Jonin through intelligence books. Jiraiya then said to Tsunade next to him, "I'm going to support Kamui of Amatsukami, you will be the backup." Tsunade nodded heavily. The current situation is 2 members of Akatsuki, although Amatsukami's members should also be hiding in the dark. But no matter what, as Mai's ninja, Tsunade will not allow Mai's side to just be a spectator. On the other side of the bone forest, Hirako was panting heavily while loudly complaining to Obsidian, "Why are you only here now? Quickly kill that bastard." Although he doesn't want to admit it, Hirako has to accept the fact that he can't kill the member of Amatsukami in front of him alone, so he can only take a step back and join forces with Obsidian. In his view, although his strength is not as good as Hirako, but the fact that Hirako vomited blood repeatedly means that there is something wrong with his body. As long as he joins forces with Obsidian, killing Hirako is a sure thing. Swish! As soon as his voice fell, half of Hirokos' body poked out from a thick bone spear behind him, and without a word of nonsense, he raised his hand and slashed down. The sharp bone blade glinted with a cold glint as it slashed across Hirokos' neck, and a thin line of blood splattered out. Immediately afterward, Hirokos' lifeless head flew up into the air. Tisk! Leaving only a faint sound of disdain, the figure retracted back into the bone spear and disappeared without a trace. Once the Dance of the Early Fern is activated, the entire bone forest will become a part of Hyojin's body. Unless Kamui can sweep away the entire bone forest, otherwise, it won't be able to do anything to him. Therefore, the number of enemies has become meaningless to him. If he can fight one, he can fight 100, and with the Type A Wind Release clone, he is not afraid of any enemy under the Six-Path realm. Chapter 486. Swish! As soon as Hyojin's figure retracted into the bone spear, a shuriken with a diameter of 1 meter flew out from behind and hit the bone spear with a whistling sound. In an instant, a twisted vortex appeared out of thin air, and the entire upper half of the bone spear was stripped away from the space-time continuum. Then, the huge black shuriken's momentum did not decrease, it flew around in a circle, and the twisted vortex appeared frequently, peeling off 7 or 8 towering bone spears in a row. In the blink of an eye, the bone forest in the area where Hiroko was located was cleared. Boom! With a loud noise, a blue Susanoo appeared in the area where the bone spears were cleared. Obsidian glanced at Hiroko's decapitated body on the ground, and his eyes under the mask were full of ridicule. In fact, Obsidian had the opportunity to act earlier, but he did not do so because Hiroko has always been a confidant of Nagato, and this is very disadvantageous to him, so he has been looking for opportunities to pull the powerful Hiroko to his side. After all, it is only a matter of time before a conflict breaks out between him and Nagato. In other words, Nagato is the final obstacle to the Eye of the Moon project. At this time, Jiraiya suddenly jumped out of the bone forest and shouted, "Immortal Art, 5 Guards Gate." Clattered Jiraiya in the middle sprayed oil, Immortal Fukasaku on one side used wind release, and Immortal Shima on the other side used fire release. Under the infusion of the Immortal Art Chakra, a sea of fire surged out, illuminating the entire night sky red. Obsidian frowned, and with a thought, his blue Susanoo spread a pair of wings behind it and flew into the air. Because of the implantation of the Hashirama cells, Yin release and Yang release have achieved a preliminary fusion, and they have a certain degree of the power of the Genjutsu. Therefore, although the Sharingan in Obsidian's eye sockets is not the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, it can activate the almost complete form of Susanoo, giving it the ability to fly. Jiraiya didn't expect that Obsidian's Susanoo could fly, so he was surprised. At this time, Jiraiya's immortal technique had already devoured a large part of the bone forest. No matter how tough Hyojin's bone spear was, it could not withstand the fire escape art, the wind escape art, and the special oil, as well as the immortal technique chakra, the 5 right guard gate. Crack! Under the continuous crisp sounds, the bone spears shattered one after another in the sea of fire. At this time, Hyojin poked out from a bone spear in the distance, and looked at Jiraiya with a speechless face. No matter how overbearing Obsidian's Kami Shuriken was, it could only peel off 7 or 8 bone spears at a time, and Hyojin's bone vein could recover in an instant. Jiraiya, with his immortal technique, directly burned a large part of the bone forest. Jiraiya was also a little embarrassed, and said repeatedly, "Sorry, I didn't expect him to fly." Jiraiya's move was actually not a bad move. If Obsidian's Susanoo couldn't fly, he could use this move to test whether Obsidian could still annihilate himself after activating the Susanoo, or whether he could annihilate his Susanoo. After all, even if it was Susanoo, it would still be very dangerous to resist an immortal technique like the 5 right guard gate. If Obsidian could annihilate himself or annihilate his Susanoo, he would definitely not choose to resist it head-on. Hyojin didn't care too much about this. He turned his head and looked in the direction where Hiriko's body was. At this moment, that area was already a sea of fire. Everything on the ground was burned clean by the 5 right guard gate, even the gravel was burned into a small piece of sand. If Obsidian didn't have time to deal with Hiriko's body just now, then no matter what kind of secret means Hiriko had, no matter what kind of magic the ghost sprout had, he would definitely be dead. But because he was in a hurry to avoid Obsidian's Kamui Shuriken, Hyojin didn't notice what Obsidian did just now. Flying in the air, Obsidian looked down at Hyojin and Jiraiya and said jokingly, "I'm very curious, how long can your dance of the early fern and sage mode last?" After saying that, Obsidian directly removed the Susanoo in the air, and in a whirlpool, his whole body disappeared, leaving only his laughter echoing in the air. Jiraiya said anxiously, "Oh no, he must have chosen another target." Jiraiya thought to himself, if it was him, he would also avoid the enemy's strong people and attack the enemy's weak points, but my village is so big, everywhere can become a target. Standing on a towering bone spear, Hyojin's expression was calm. He had a feeling that Obsidian didn't leave. Suddenly, the surroundings quietened down. The originally noisy beasts' howls, the intense sounds of battle, and the intermittent sounds of explosions all gradually subsided. Hyojin's expression became serious. What's going on? Not only Hyojin, but also Jiraiya, Tsunade, and the surrounding my ninjas also noticed that something was wrong. Walking out of the ruins, Kurenai asked doubtfully, "Did the enemy retreat?" Kakashi said with a solemn face, "I'm afraid it's not that simple, we'd better be vigilant." At this time, standing on the bone spear, Hyojin raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked up at the distant sky. In the sky above the center of the village, a figure in a red cloud was quietly floating in the sky, with his arms spread out, as if he was doing something. Feeling a huge chakra fluctuation, Jiraiya, who was in sage mode, also found the figure in the air, and cast his gaze towards the direction of the figure. "That's," Jiraiya frowned, he didn't know why he suddenly had a very bad feeling. Immediately Jiraiya shouted, "No matter what he's doing, we must stop him." Hyojin said calmly as he made a seal, "It's too late." As soon as Hyojin's voice fell, a slightly majestic voice came from the distant sky, "Shinra Tensei." Boom, 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 a huge shockwave swept through the center of the village and quickly spread in all directions. Everything in the way of this shockwave was mercilessly crushed. Buildings and streets were swallowed by the shock wave. The constantly spreading shock wave was like a giant beast, devouring everything. Smoke and dust filled the sky, covering everything in an instant. The originally dark night became even darker, and one couldn't even see their own fingers in front of them. Looking at the shock wave coming toward them, Kurenai was stunned, and Kakashi also showed a complicated expression of shock and helplessness. Gale even subconsciously jumped on Shien and protected her under his body. Just when everyone was ready to face the impact, a boundless black iron sand curtain suddenly spread out. From the sky, it looked like a black blanket, instantly covering a large area of the village. Chapter 487. Sizzle, the lights above her head flickered, emitting a sound of poor contact. Hinata, whose face was covered in dust, was in a daze like a kitten. She was completely in a trance. "Someone save me! It hurts. I want my mother. I want my mother." At this time, shouts of varying strength, intermittent moans, and painful wails came from all corners of the shelter. They overlapped with each other, causing the shelter to fall into a strange noise. Hinata looked around in a daze. Everything was dark in front of her. The long row of lights on the dome of the shelter had been extinguished. The few remaining lights were also flickering because of the damage. In addition, gravel and dust kept falling from the top, causing the shelter to be filled with smoke and dust. Even the scenery that was only 3 to 4 meters away could not be seen clearly. Suddenly, a figure rushed in front of Hinata, shook her, and asked, "Hey, are you hurt?" Hinata's white eyes slowly focused at this time, and there was some spirit in them. Immediately, she saw the figure in front of her clearly and replied, "Are you Naruto-kun? I'm not hurt. Looking at you just now, I thought you were hurt." After muttering softly, Naruto quickly picked up the pile of gravel beside Hinata. Ah! Only then did Hinata realize that Zuyuan, who was originally beside her, was buried in the pile of gravel. She exclaimed and hurriedly helped Naruto lift the gravel. Soon, the two little guys finished clearing the gravel and found that Zuyuan was not the only one buried under the gravel. Zhu Sui used her body to protect Zuyuan, protecting Zuyuan under her body. After rescuing Zhu Sui and Zuyuan, Hinata asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Zhu Sui shook her head weakly. Although she was buried in the gravel, fortunately, the gravel was not too big, so she only had some bruises on her back, and her life was not in danger. Ziyuan, who had come to her senses, burst into tears. At the moment, Ziyuan was very scared, because the tragic scenes she saw in the death prophecy seemed to be coming true little by little. Not far away, Sasuke's mother looked around and looked at the shocking scene. Her face was heavy, and she told Sasuke beside her, "Sasuke, go help the others." Although Sasuke was only 8 years old, in the ninja world, he was already able to go to the battlefield at this age. During the Third Shinobi World War, many children under the age of 8 had already gone to the battlefield, and Itachi had seen the cruelty of war at the age of 4, so in the eyes of Sasuke's mother, Sasuke was not only her son, but also a ninja of Uchiha. Looking at his mother's injured and bleeding leg, Sasuke hesitated, "But your leg, I'm fine, you don't have to worry about me." With that, Sasuke's mother also opened her Sharingan and gently rubbed Sasuke's head. "Don't forget, I'm also a ninja." Sasuke no longer hesitated, got up and shouted to Naruto, who was not far away, "Naruto, let's go save the others." Naruto quickly responded. At this time, Hinata whispered, "Naruto-kun, can I go with you? I have the Byakugan, maybe I can help." Sasuke walked over, looked Hinata up and down, and said arrogantly, "You can follow us, but you have to be smart, don't get in the way." Hinata bowed happily, "Thank you, Sasuke-kun." In the dark shelter where smoke and dust billowed, the three little guys walked all the way together. Fortunately, with Hinata's Byakugan, they could rescue some of the Mai villagers who were buried under the rubble from time to time. A moment later, they came in front of a collapsed boulder. Looking at the completely collapsed tunnel in front of him, Hinata took a deep breath and couldn't help but ask, "How did this happen? What happened just now?" Naturally, Naruto couldn't answer. He went forward to push the boulder blocking the tunnel, but found that it couldn't be pushed at all. As Sasuke thought about it, he said casually, "Our shelter is dozens of meters underground. Even if there was a huge explosion on the ground, it shouldn't have affected this place." Naruto curled his lips. Then why did so many places in the shelter collapse? Sasuke was speechless and said angrily, "How would I know? But something must have happened to the ground." Hinata said worriedly, "I wonder how father is now." Hearing Hinata's words, Sasuke was also faintly worried, but he soon thought to himself, "My father is the patriarch of the Uchiha clan. He will definitely be fine." Tap, tap, at this moment, there was the sound of unhurried footsteps coming from the dim tunnel. Sasuke and the others quickly turned around and found a black shadow walking towards them. When the other party approached, Sasuke immediately recognized the identity of the visitor and said, "It's you, Hyuga Ningtse." Just as Ningtse was secretly paying attention to Sasuke, Sasuke has also been secretly paying attention to Ningtse, who is known as a genius, so he recognized Ningtse at a glance. Ningtse glanced at the people in front of him and immediately said to Hinata, "Miss Hinata, Hinata quickly returned the greeting, "Brother Ningxi." Naruto scratched his head and said, "The way they address each other is so strange." Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest and explained coolly, "What do you know? Hinata is the eldest daughter of the Hyuga family, and her status is equivalent to my brother's status in the Uchiha clan. Ningxi is just a member of the Hyuga family responsible for protecting the Hyuga family. Although they are relatives, Hinata is the master of the family, and Ningxi is just a retainer." Naruto muttered, "They are obviously relatives of the same age. Why do they have to distinguish between master and retainer? The Hyuga clan is really confusing." Sasuke glanced at Naruto disdainfully. "Idiot, there are many rules in a rich family like us." Listening to Sasuke and Naruto openly discuss the difference in status between the Hyuga family and the branch family in front of him, Ningxi's face was burning. As he grew older, Ningxi gradually understood the difference between the branch family and the main family, and gradually understood his position in the family. He didn't dislike protecting Hinata, but he hoped to protect his sister as a brother, not as a branch family. At this moment, Ningxi suddenly shouted, "Be careful!" With that, Ningxi subconsciously pulled Hinata back. Sasuke and Naruto also reacted and retreated far away. Boom! Not long after they retreated, the boulder blocking the passage was blown up. Through the breach, several little guys found that in the passage at the other end, several Mai ninjas were fighting fiercely with a ninja in a red cloud suit. After seeing the identity of one of the Mai ninjas, Hinata exclaimed, "It's Sister Ling." Chapter 488. In the narrow passage of the shelter, several figures were fighting fiercely. Bang! In the muffled sound, a figure was kicked out and hit the wall. Damn it! The person who was kicked away was none other than Mitarai Anko, who was in charge of guarding the sanctuary. There were a total of 5 teams stationed in the shelter, with a total of 20 outstanding Mai ninjas. But since they encountered the Akatsuki member who invaded the shelter, the members of the team were killed one after another. Until now, only Red Bean was left among the 20 Mai ninjas. If it wasn't for the chance encounter with Mute, Kuroto, and Uchiha Izumi, Red Bean would have died in the hands of the Akatsuki member. Bagua 64 Palms. Bell, who had activated the Byakugan, used the Mute as a cover, moved behind the enemy and used all her strength to use the strongest soft fist technique she had mastered. Pa-pa-par! In an instant, a series of crisp palm strikes sounded in the passage. Mute and Uchiha Izumi looked at each other and said happily, "Got it! The Hyuga clan's soft fist can directly destroy the enemy's meridians." On the surface, it seems that the enemy was not seriously injured, but the internal meridians may have been completely destroyed by the soft fist. But at this time, the strong enemy who had suffered a full set of Bagua 64 palms didn't seem to be affected at all. He turned around and kicked Bell, who was behind him. Mute, who had almost used up his chakra, was stunned. On the side, Uchiha Izumi, who had 2 Sharingan activated, was trembling in fear. The enemy was too strong, so strong that she almost lost the will to fight. At this time, the Akatsuki member turned around and walked step by step toward Mute and Uchiha Izumi. Staring at the Rinnegan in the opponent's eye sockets, Mute fell into despair. The enemy not only has amazing insight, but his body can also launch missiles. They fought hard for a long time, and finally created an opportunity, but they found that the opponent's body was immune to the soft fist attack. Uchiha Izumi's legs softened, and she fell to the ground. Red Bean, who was not far away, struggled to get up, but her throat suddenly became hot, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She fell to the ground again and shouted unwillingly, "Don't let him enter the shelter." Undoubtedly, the one who invaded the shelter was the Azura Path of the 6 Paths of Pain. Because the previous Azura Path was destroyed by Suijin, so this is a brand new Azura Path, but just like the previous Azura Path, it is also a sturdy fatty. It stood in the passage and glanced indifferently at the few ninjas who blocked it, and immediately raised its hands. Ka-ka-ka, with a mechanical sound, many missiles appeared on the raised arms of the Azura path, aiming at the few ninjas in the passage. Swish, just when Xiang Ling, Mute, and the others thought that they couldn't escape, suddenly, a shuriken shot from the other end of the passage. The Azura path didn't move, but slightly tilted its head, avoiding the shuriken, and then looked at the other end of the passage. Fire release. Great fireball jutsu. In an instant, a fierce flame shot from the other end of the passage. The Azura path raised its arms to protect its face, and still didn't dodge, using its body to resist the fire release jutsu. Through a moment of observation, it has judged that the strength of the fire release jutsu won't cause too much damage to it, and its body can completely resist it. But just as the flames were about to dissipate, a few black shadows rushed over under the cover of the flames. The Azura path quickly noticed that the ones rushing at the front were 2 7 or 8 years old children, one with yellow hair, and the other with black hair, one on the left and one on the right, rushing through the gap beside it. Then, the 2 children with Byakugan simultaneously put on a soft fist posture and attacked. A group of children, Azura Dao, had a look of disdain on his face. However, when he was about to raise his hand to block the attack, he realized that his body was bound by several steel wires. At that moment, he noticed that the first wave of imps that charged past him were holding onto several specially processed steel wires that were so thin that they could not be seen. In this moment of delay, when the Azura path broke the steel wires that entangled itself, the 2 children with Byakugan were already in front of it. Clap, 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 another crisp sound of palm strikes rang in the passage. This time, it was different from the sneak attack from Kuroto's back. It was a full frontal attack, and the 2 children were fiercely attacking the weak points of the human body. After the attack was completed, the 4 children, Sasuke, Naruto, Ningxi, and Hinata, panted heavily as they observed the results of the battle. This was the first time for them to experience such an actual battle. However, the Azura path just shook its neck, and then the corner of its mouth curled up, revealing a smile. Together with the chubby face of the Azura path, it was a charming smile, but in the eyes of the 4 children, it was extremely terrifying and creepy. Then, the Azura path slowly raised its hand and aimed at the 4 children. Hinata and Ningxi. At this time, Kuroto rushed over and protected the children behind her. The Azura path aimed at Kuroto and the children's arms, and with a violent chakra reaction, its light cannon flashed with a dazzling blue light. In an instant, the originally dark passage of the sanctuary became as bright as day. The children behind Kuroto were all shivering. At this moment, they deeply understood the cruelty of the ninja world, and the horror of life and death. Facing the light cannon aimed at her, Kuroto was actually not much stronger than the children behind her. She bit her lips, and in despair and fear, she shouted loudly, "Kuroto!" As soon as the voice fell, Kuroto's pure white left eye suddenly turned bright blue like stars. At the same time, an extremely strong repulsive force suddenly formed, like an invisible hand, suddenly repelling the Azura path. Boom! Under the strong repulsive force, the Azura path was directly smashed into the wall, and its body was torn apart. After the attack, Kuroto's left eye returned to pure white, and the chakra in her body seemed to be instantly sucked out. What just happened? Seeing that Kuroto's strong enemy was inexplicably killed by Kuroto just by shouting Hyojin's name, the few people in the passage were shocked, and they looked at Kuroto in confusion. Kuroto was also at a loss. She only vaguely remembered that a few days ago, Hyojin had cast a technique on her left eye. Chapter 489. At this time, Mute walked to the wreckage of the Azura realm. After a quick check, he said to everyone in the tunnel, There's no chakra reaction anymore. Uchiha Izumi whispered, "Is it dead?" Red Bean struggled to stand up, held the wall, and staggered over, saying, "This should be just a human puppet of the Akatsuki leader." After confirming that the Azura path has been completely destroyed, they once again looked at Hyuga Yui, who was still lying on the ground. Mute asked doubtfully, What happened just now?" Since the Azura path was using the light cannon, everyone's vision was blocked by the strong light from the light cannon. No one could see what had happened. Yu shook her head and said, I don't know what happened." In fact, even Yu herself wasn't sure what happened just now. She only had a vague feeling that it might have something to do with the spell that Hyojin cast on her left eye a few days ago. However, the scene just now was too strange. She was supposed to be an invincible enemy, but she was defeated in an instant, so she didn't dare to say anything. At least before she talked to Hyojin in private, she didn't dare to say anything. Red Bean looked around and muttered, "Is there someone else hiding nearby?" Mute also became alert. Could it be someone from Amatsukami? All of a sudden, everyone in the passageway other than Kuroto became suspicious on the ground. When the Azura realm was instantly destroyed in the tunnel, Tendo, who was floating above Mai, and Hyojin on the ground sensed the change at the same time. Heaven's Will's cold gaze gradually slanted downwards, glancing in the direction of the shelter. Is it the leader of Amatsukami? Is he hiding in Mai's shelter? A doubt welled up in Nagato's mind. The destruction of the Azura realm was too sudden. There was no sign at all, and Nagato was distracted by controlling the 6 paths of pain at the same time. His main attention was focused on the heavenly Tao made from Yahiko's corpse. So when the chakra connection of the Azura realm was suddenly cut off, he could not determine what happened in the passage of the sanctuary for a while. Based on the information from the Azura realm, Duan Ling Tian seemed to be using the Shinra Tensei that he was most proficient in. But one thing he could be sure of was that Mai's 9 Tails Jinchuriki was hiding in the shelter. After pondering for a moment, the heavenly Tao extended its arm in the direction of the shelter on the other side. Cough, cough. While coughing lightly, Kuroto removed the iron sand curtain in front of him. He had already sensed that Yui had just used the transcription seal to seal the rain wheel in Yui's left eye. Ling should be in the shelter. Did something happen there too? As the iron sand curtain was removed, Hyojin's vision was in a mess. Damn it! Although he had expected it, seeing such a scene still made him very angry. There was no doubt that the small courtyard that his parents left him in a good location must have been destroyed. Jiraiya also got up from the ground and looked around with shock and anger on his face. At this moment, Hyojin and the others were in the area where Wu had invaded Mai. It was closer to the outer wall and at the edge of the village. So when the Shinra Tensei spread to this place, its power had weakened a lot. In addition, with the protection of Hyojin's iron sand curtain, the damage around the village was far less than the central area of the village. But even so, there were only a few buildings left standing around. It could be seen what the central area of Mai had become. This made Jiraiya, who loved Mai deeply, extremely angry. "Nagato!" Jiraiya shouted as he looked at the heavens Tao in the sky. He then charged forward without a care in the world. Tsunade, who climbed out of the ruins, did not rush to the tendo like Jiraiya, but quickly printed with a heavy face, and immediately pressed on the ground. Psychic Jutsu! In the loud shout of Tsunade, a white smoke rolled up. When the white smoke dissipated, a huge white-blue slug appeared in front of Tsunade. This is the psychic beast of Tsunade, one of the Sannin, the Shikatsu forest slug. Looking at the mess around, the slug was shocked. "How did Mai become like this?" Tsunade said in a deep voice. "I will explain to you in detail later. It is more important to treat the injured first." Yes. At the command of Tsunade, the huge slug immediately split into countless small slugs and scattered throughout the ruins to treat the injured Mai ninjas. Although the villagers have entered the shelter in advance and escaped the disaster, there are still a large number of my ninjas on the ground, so the attack just now, the casualties of my ninjas must be not light. If they are not treated in time, it is likely to cause huge casualties. Hyojin didn't care about Tsunade. He jumped up and flew into the air. At the moment, the priority must be to get rid of Tendo. This guy is simply a human-shaped nuclear bomb. If he lets it go on like this, the entire my village will be directly wiped out. Outside my village, a majestic goshawk was searching around the periphery of my village. After a long time, it finally approached the cliff where Nagato's real body was. At this moment, the goshawk's sharp eyes flickered when it noticed two figures on the cliff. It closed its wings and dove toward the cliff at an extremely fast speed. It seemed like it wanted to get closer to confirm the identities of the figures on the cliff. At the spur of the moment, countless pieces of paper swarmed from all directions and stuck to the goshawk. Despite sensing the danger, the goshawk did not turn around to escape. Instead, it tightened its wings and dove toward the cliff. Hiss, hiss, as the detonation talismans were ignited, sparks appeared on the pieces of paper stuck to the goshawk's body. The goshawk turned a deaf ear to the dangerous situation that was right in front of it. It stared at the cliff with its sharp eyes, which was getting closer and closer. Boom, boom, boom. Soon enough, a series of explosions were heard in the sky, and the goshawk was directly devoured by the explosions. Nagato, who was standing at the edge of the cliff, only glanced at it briefly. Next to him, Konan retracted her right hand that was controlling the paper escape and said, "Hirako has set up a special potion to drive away birds and beasts in the vicinity. That goshawk just now is not an ordinary bird. Our location has been exposed." Nagato said lightly, "Don't worry about it." In the underground base of the My Intelligence team, Kaichi Yamanaka suddenly opened his eyes, removed the device on his head, and said weakly, "Quick, inform Naruto-sama, I've found the specific location of the target." After saying that, he suddenly realized that the underground base of the intelligence team was in a mess, and all kinds of equipment were lying all over the place. At this time, one of the intelligence team's subordinates reported to him in panic, "We've lost contact with the Naruto building." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.